somebody that can definitely go deep. So 3 NA representatives, actually.
Yeah, and so did Jaeyun have that. He had that deep run in that one BSL. I forget which one it was, but he got to the round of 4 himself. And yeah, I mean, it is kind of the group with the only North American players. But there is going to at least be one North American player. But let's, talk a bit about Casper himself, who's the only European in this group. And Casper also just a mainstay of non-Korean StarCraft going back to even before Remastered. I mean, I think this guy played in WCGs and stuff. So very strong Terran player. I know sometimes he plays PvT, but I know for tournaments probably he's going to be playing TvT. So also kind of a slew of race pickers in this group. But I don't know, like the skill level I feel like is so tight in this group. I think probably the favorite in the group by far would be Dragon. I think Dragon I just think Dragon's slightly better than the rest of the group. But Jaeyun, StRyKeR, Casper, all really strong players. And the first game is going to be Jaeyun versus StRyKeR, which is going to be a really interesting matchup because this has a lot of history. I mean, StRyKeR is basically, StRyKeR and Jaeyun have been playing from before even StarCraft 2 came out. I remember StRyKeR was, in 2009, 2008, he was on Light. Jaeyun was playing on the many CSL teams. So these guys have been playing forever. But StRyKeR's return kind of during StarCraft Remastered, he kind of came in as like Jaeyun's student. You know what I'm saying? So like he was there. He's like always in Jaeyun's Discords talking about strategy with Jaeyun and with Crossy. So Crossy, Jaeyun, StRyKeR are kind of like the North American Korean trio of Zerg players that like, they talk about their Zerg strategies. They're very close to each other. So this is going to be a really interesting matchup from kind of that narrative perspective of like, has StRyKeR surpassed Jaeyun at this point, but also just from like a mind game and kind of this history standpoint.
Yeah, so we're going to get into our first match. It's going to be Jaeyun versus StRyKeR. Remember, even though Jaeyun's a Zerg player, he's going to be playing PvZ. It is going to be on Eclipse, just like we've seen through the rest of the round of 32. So let's get into our first game, Jaeyun versus StRyKeR on Eclipse. In the top right, in the white, which I actually thought was blue and I was getting confused, it is Jaeyun.
And in the bottom left, we've got the other North American Korean hope. It is StRyKeR 17. And Jaeyun opening up with some nice alt chat for the viewers. Already knows what we're talking about in terms of, has StRyKeR surpassed Jaeyun? He knows it's all about that narrative, So I think Jaeyun really would like to defend his pride as well. And this is going to be a really interesting matchup. Jaeyun actually has a very strong Protoss versus Zerg, and just in general, his versus Zerg matchups are pretty good, but especially his Protoss is actually very strong. So, just because he's not Zerg here, I wouldn't put him at a disadvantage.
Yeah, so as you were saying, StRyKeR and Jaeyun, both old school players. I also recognize StRyKeR from a long time ago in the Light Clan. Light Clan was obviously a very good clan back in the days, but always like a tier below, like the top teams like TOT or PG. But StRyKeR, as I've stated before, I started playing with him, I hit him on the ladder about 1.5 years ago, and his first 10 minutes kind of so-so, but once he got into the macro phase of the game, he was really good. So now that he's been practicing with Jaeyun and Crossy, it's noticeable, even though I haven't hit him recently on the ladder. The improvement, you can tell, is considerable. And what he has going for him is he is Korean. He speaks Korean. He can understand some of the FP VODs that he has access to and copy builds. I know players like Crossy love copying meta builds and implementing them. So it's no shock to me that StRyKeR has improved drastically over the past few months. Now, we do have Jaeyun actually opening for a Forge expand, and I think this is already a mistake because of how strong StRyKeR's Hydra production is, and we really didn't. Okay. So we've got a pylon at the front For some reason, based on that pylon position, I thought this was Protoss's main, and we were actually just getting hatchery blocked at our nexus. But this is not cats, and I actually just had the bases.
Yeah, I don't know. Jaeyun, kind of the cheeky play. I don't know what happened in this early game. You never really want to get the cannon down before the nexus, especially if it's something like an overpull. Kind of sets you pretty decently behind. You can see StRyKeR actually only made one pair of lings, I believe. So this is very good for StRyKeR. Now StRyKeR going immediately for his gas, but he's going to take the third base as well. So this is looking like a very bog standard build from StRyKeR, and Jaeyun I think maybe mind gaming a bit, putting that pylon down in that position. I mean, it's weird because usually the cannon rushes are behind the middle line, but maybe he was trying to fake also some kind of proxy gate, and that was a pylon for like a shield battery or something. I don't know, but that was really weird. And Jaeyun slightly a bit behind in terms of the build orders, but you know, it shouldn't be anything that's kind of unrecoverable. And he's teching pretty well. He's got his gateway down, only had to make one cannon, so it wasn't like he had to make two, or because obviously you definitely don't want to make two cannons in this situation, especially not before your nexus. So they're both just gonna get into this really standard game. And yeah, like you said, Nyokin, StRyKeR's really strong. I mean, he really has improved without a doubt, and I think when he is in his kind of element, in his you know, in his stride and playing against the style he's comfortable against, he's really strong. But Jaeyun himself is the same type of player. If he gets into that late game situation, especially if he gets into that late game situation, but mid to late game, he starts just going like crazy on the multitask.
Whoa.
And what do we have here?
So this is actually going to be 4-gate speed zealot, I imagine. The Overlord, I don't see it in the main at all. I'm trying to look at the menu. Okay, there it is. So he sees nothing in the main, and this should trigger alarm bells. A lot of Zerg players, if you watch pro games, they will make like a decent amount of links and then just spread them across the entirety of the map to make sure they're not gonna run into something like this. Because as StRyKeR, to see nothing in the main, you imagine that there has to be something at the natural now. And generally, if there's something at the natural, it's most of the time going to be a second gate. So when he sees nothing at the natural, he should know that, hey, there has to be something here. I know you aren't purposely just not spending, 500 or 600 minerals. That would be crazy talk. So I'd like to see him spread out his lings, but for now, he's not doing it. Actually, it's not going to be 4-gate Citadel. I'm surprised that it is a Stargate. It is just going to be second gate in the center of the map. There's no Citadel at all. So this is very weird, because at least with 4-gate, if it gets scouted, you can at least try and save it. But with just 1-gate production, if these lings find it, this gate's 100% dead.
Yeah, but at the same time, I kind of like, you can see StRyKeR is attaching one ling to go out on the map to see what's going on. And Protosses sometimes do this build where they go 2-gate before Stargate, and it actually pressures the Zerg at a very uncomfortable time. Now, it's not going to be it's not going to be a speed lock push or a +1 push, but there's a lot of zealots early on in a phase where Zerg is generally droning. So hiding the gateway like that is kind of low risk, because even if he loses one gate, it's not the end of the world. You can see his Stargate and Citadel are still decently timed. But if the Zerg doesn't know this is 2-gate, suddenly as Jaeyun is walking across the map, StRyKeR doesn't really have much to defend with. He only has drones. He's been droning, and again, this is a really awkward timing for Zerg to be hit at. And you can see the Corsairs also joining the fray. He can't really afford to lose the Corsair. Jaeyun can't. Some Zerglings pop. This Dragoon gonna be microed away, and you can see StRyKeR doesn't even have, okay, now speed actually finished, so at least StRyKER's gonna have speed, but already some damage is done. He had to pull all the drones mining from the natural back to his main. At the third, he took a couple of beatings, some beating from that one zealot, and this is gonna be okay for Jaeyun. Behind this, he's getting his Templar archives, he's adding more gateways. Now StRyKER, I don't think he took significant damage, but overall, it's all right for Jaeyun, considering the fact that StRyKER's basically not mining from his natural this whole time.
Well, you can tell that Jaeyun definitely plays Zerg, because the entire time the Goon was not focusing on the lings at all. He was just simply focusing the Overlords, because he knows Zergs at this point, doesn't have that much supply available. Also doesn't have a lot of units because he attacked at 6 minutes, and generally Zerg is preparing for a 7:30 timing. So this was really slick move from Jaeyun, and Jaeyun is just doing what Jaeyun does. As a Terran player, I have experience playing versus him in ZVT, and what he likes to do is he likes to go drops and just make the game super chaotic. And that's exactly what we saw there, attacking the natural and the third base at the same time. Even though it didn't get a lot of drone kills or force out that many actual units, he forced a lot of lost mining time. And we were talking about how if StRyKeR gets into his comfort zone, he's super deadly. So the question now for me is, has he been thrown off enough where now Jaeyun can overcome the huge Hydra flood that we know is coming in the next couple minutes?
Yeah, that's kind of always going to be the question in this matchup. Can he not die to Hydralisks? It looks like he's gonna have a lot of Templar with Storm soon. Still no Storm, but StRyKeR doesn't have that many Hydras just yet. So I think Jaeyun is actually gonna be fine making a couple DTs, but these DTs alone at this time, they're not like who's the Protoss that made DTs against Crossy and just walked him into his base? We'll have to come back to that. But basically, when you make DTs this late, you really need Corsairs to kind of support them to do any damage. So, but still, kind of making sure there's no fourth base, making sure the Zerg is only on 3 base. Finally, Jaeyun finishes with his speed law timing, has speed and +1. So chasing these Hydralisks down, no +1 yet for StRyKeR, so hopefully his upgrades are coming soon, because that +1 attack upgrade on the Hydralisks is really, really important in this matchup. And actually, wait, Jaeyun doesn't have +1 himself, it looks like, and he's getting +1 armor, so really interesting. That's actually indicative of a very strong 2-base timing, and actually the +1 armor is technically slightly better against Hydralisks. The +1 attack is important against Zerglings, but if the Zerg is only making Hydralisks, and look, Dragoon production already started, so really cheeky build here from Jaeyun with that 2-gate, and the 1DT gets in here, gets a couple of swipes on the drones, 1, 2 go down, but wow, that was really lucky from StRyKeR, and now even more chaos in the middle of the map, because it's just going to be a small skirmish.
Well, we can see that StRyKeR's dealing with this quite well, because he's actually ahead in workers now, 44-43. Didn't lose many drones to that 1 DT. I think only like 1 or 2 went down. So really, Jaeyun's starting to be in trouble because it's 90 supply versus 80. He does have a lot of Templars out, though. He is starting to pump out Dragoons, which kind of is the backbone of the army, just sitting behind the Zealots, dishing out a ton of damage. Now, you can't have that happen. 1 Templar getting picked off for free. He still has 3 of them, and he still has double Storm on 2 of them. So this is a very strong army, but there's already 6 hatch production for StRyKeR, and it looks like he's even taking a 4th base. So if he survives this 1 attack, you would think that going into the mid-late game, he should be in a phenomenal position. He's consistently within 10 supply of Jaeyun, and now Jaeyun also can't reinforce that easily.
Yeah, Jaeyun needs to take his time here and just join up his army with the army from his main. He does have +1 armor, and there are no attack upgrades on these Hydralisks, so this Protoss army is actually going to be deceptively strong. A nice storm goes off on those Hydralisks. If Jaeyun can actually land some 6 storms here, I think he can actually plow through the Zerg army, but he's getting a bit sectioned off. It's such a chaotic state of the game. I mean, StRyKeR is doing a really good job kiting around, finding some flanking positions with that 1 group of Hydralisks, and you can see he's actually morphing lurkers behind this, and that's going to be terrible for Jaeyun. Jaeyun's just not hitting the timing he would like to hit with this +1 armor. If the lurkers go down, it's going to be so much harder to bust. Now finally Jaeyun kind of joined his reinforcements. He's going to get maybe a couple of Overlord kills, which would be massive because that would supply block StRyKeR, but look, StRyKeR is getting lurkers into position, and at this point it's going to be so hard to break through a lurker line, and StRyKER's already on a 4th base, so time is ticking for Jaeyun. He has to make something happen, whether it's pushing in here and killing a base or taking his own 3rd, but I feel like he's missed his timing.
Unfortunately for Jaeyun, he has missed the timing, because we see the Observer has just now started, and really, as a Protoss player, you're looking to get the Observer out around 11 minutes, and it's already approaching 12 minutes, 12:15. If he had it with this army right now, where there is not critical mass lurkers where he still has 5 to 6 storms, there would have been a real chance for him to bust through. But now that StRyKeR has his 4th base, already has a lot of lurkers, can start sunkening up there, I don't think that Jaeyun can really do anything. Now, it's not the end of the world for Jaeyun because Jaeyun is one of the best multitaskers the foreign scene has, but he does need to start thinking about getting a 4th base because Protoss players generally mine out their main and nat pretty quickly and are forced to stay on the main and nat for quite a long time. So that means it's going to run dry pretty quickly. Looks like Jaeyun is kind of waffling between the 3rd and the nat, not really sure of what to do. I think a pylon is going up. Oh, well, this is actually a lot of hydras to bleed off right here. You can see he's trying to find a Templar kill. Might get one, but no! The +1 armor saves the day, and that Templar actually survives.
Yeah, and I think StRyKeR kind of forgot his upgrades this game. I don't know. Is that +2 research?
Well, that's +2. That's +2.
That's +1. So you see, StRyKeR actually with a huge mistake for getting that +1, but at the same time, Jaeyun didn't actually, he didn't invest into a +2, and now Jaeyun's gonna double expand. And PvZ, it's such a weird matchup these days because it really isn't that much about the base count, more so than it is about the army composition and about the pre-hive and post-hive timings. But as long as Protoss has a really decently sized army, it doesn't matter what the Zerg's economy is. I mean, obviously, if Zerg has more stuff to work with, it's harder. But if Protoss gets to that breaking point, look, this force is so strong. If he lands the right storms, he can bust through any location, but this 3rd base is going to be really hard to attack, so he's just going to go for the 4th base. The lurkers are totally out of position because he's coming from such a weird angle, and the zealots get right on top of the lurkers. They're going to just eat them up for free, and suddenly StRyKeR just caught with his pants down. He has to reinforce this position, but Dragoons are already on the high ground, and the 6 storms are coming down. Jaeyun playing beautifully, even on top of the lurkers, and suddenly exactly what I was talking about. It looked like Zerg was in such a good position, but you can never underestimate this Protoss army.
Yeah, Protoss gets into the perfect position, slamming on top of those lurkers and then comboing it on the high ground. Just the storms decimating the majority of the hydras. This is going to be 100% a dead base, but the Templars now don't have any storm. So maybe actually StRyKeR has enough to actually push through. He's not focusing down the observer though. Getting the observer would nullify the goons from actually taking out the lurker. Now, despite the terrible losses that StRyKeR took, look at the macro. He's now back even in supply, and now Jaeyun is on the ropes. Protoss really needs AoE to stop the onslaught that Zerg can dish out at them. And now it looks like there's only really 1 Templar available, but if Jaeyun gets this base up and running, it's gonna be 4 bases versus 3, and you never, ever wanna be down bases as a Zerg player going up against any race, really.
Yeah, damn right you don't want to, but the situation got reversed so quickly. Now suddenly StRyKeR, I mean, he lost that base, but look, he has Hive, he has his +1 finally, and he has so many units. He can't lose too many Hydralisk to the storm. That was a 6 storm from Jaeyun, and he still has a couple storms to work with. Jaeyun does, but quickly the Protoss army is dwindling. There are more reinforcements on the way. No, those are just probes, actually, just a couple of zealots. So it's going to be really hard for Jaeyun to hold on to this base. I have a feeling StRyKeR is going to have just enough to bust it as more Zerg units join the fray here, and there's just no storm to work with. So Hydralisks have free reign to just spit all over the Protoss army. A nice storm coming in clutch at the end there, and maybe it's going to be enough to stave off the Zerg swarm, but it's just going to be so close as a lurker comes in, burrows, but just the Zerg units aren't there for StRyKeR.
Yeah, the loss of the 15 drones for StRyKeR, it means that he just is going to fizzle out, and that's going to give the 4th base to Jaeyun. He's up 15 workers now. He's at a good probe count, 56 versus 42 drones. Sure, StRyKeR's drone count is still fine on 3 bases, but he would like it to be around 55. But he's just going to keep pushing it. The Archon is still alive. We are out of storms. There's not that many cannons. There's not that much supporting cast for the cannons either. Well, actually, there is a decent amount of zealots, but Hydras just keep appearing out of nowhere, but it doesn't look like StRyKeR actually has enough to deal the killing blow.
Yeah, but StRyKER's +2 is about to finish before Jaeyun's +2 armor, and he's gonna have +1 carapace also. So he's gonna have a really sick timing here in just a second to maybe bust this 4th, and it's gonna be really important for him to actually break down this 4th, because the Protoss economy is just in such a nice position, though. I don't know if he's gonna have enough to do it. He's getting into nice positions, but the cannons there's so many cannons, and finally there's some Templar with energy, and StRyKeR, I guess, wisely chooses to retreat, but I don't think all hope is lost here, even though the Protoss has 4 bases, because StRyKeR, you know, he's had this high for a while. He needs to get a Defiler mount out, and once he gets Defilers, I mean, it's gonna change the entirety of the game.
Well, or once he builds 17 drones at once, which is what he just did. So we went from 42 to 59 in the blink of an eye, and the econ's really going to start rolling for StRyKeR now. But because it is a 2-player map, it's not easy to take a 5th base as either player. If Jaeyun or StRyKeR attempt to take top left, both players are able to just reinforce and defend their expansion at the same time pretty easily. So I wonder if anybody's going to try and take bottom right, that it will relieve pressure on one side of the map, but also forces, you know, the players to balance their defenses across base. So it's going to be very difficult if someone decides to expand there. It looks like Jaeyun's decided that now's the time to attack. He's up 25 supply, but those powerful upgrades have started to kick in for StRyKeR.
Yeah, and Jaeyun just finished his +2 armor as well, so that's going to be important. If he can get up, there's no way to know that there's no defense here at this 3rd, but if he can randomly get up there, that would be terrible for StRyKeR. And StRyKeR, he's just getting caught out of position repeatedly. I think, you know, you can see he has a couple of units all over the map. He needs to just consolidate his position for a second and make sure, you know, this doesn't happen. And Jaeyun, he finally found the weak spot in the Zerg defense. He knows there's nothing at this 3rd base, but is he going to overcommit here? Because StRyKER is actually rallying his units back, getting lurkers on top of the Protoss army, and you can see there's just no good storms to be had. He's storming individual lurkers. I mean, obviously you should do that, but he's not getting the massive value out of it. But somehow this +2 armor is just doing so much work. No Zerg units have died, and I mean, I feel like over time StRyKER is going to be able to whittle down this Protoss force, but just look at the supply advantage for Protoss. He has some nice, you know, he has a lot of bases behind this. He's going to have a lot of production. So the 2nd round is going to be so crazy. And StRyKER, he needs to start, you know, if there's, like you were saying, Naokin, the bottom 2 expansions, those are really important as, okay, this is a signature Jaeyun with the shuttle harass. He actually was making shuttles very early on. Usually Zerg is the one that wants to expand to the bottom right because it's just much easier for Zerg, I mean, with Nidus canals and just with the mobility of the Zerg army to defend that location. Whereas, you know, if Protoss expands to the bottom right, suddenly top left is totally wide open. So you can see this map playing out kind of like it would in PvT, and Jaeyun's taking the top leftmost base while StRyKER is going to try and take the bottom right side.
A typical Jaeyun fashion to harass every single base at the same time, and StRyKER actually just made a huge mistake because look at the supply, like 9 or 100 supply out of 184. I just saw him make a huge round of Overlord, which could have been units. It would have been closer to be about 115 supply to 145. Now it's only 100 versus 145, but still Zerg's army, Ling Hydra lurkers with heavy upgrades and adrenaline, can deal with the Protoss army. But while this is all happening, as we were talking about his multitask with the drops, he's taking top left. That's going to get up and running, and there's still no Dark Swarm in sight, so it's going to be very hard for StRyKER to actually deal with it. Also, I don't think StRyKER even knows about top left.
Yeah, I mean, well, now he does, because there's a couple of units there just killing cannons. And yeah, this is such a hard situation for StRyKER. He hasn't had the time to stabilize and to get into that high tech. I mean, he does have crackling, and he probably has the upgrades coming for +3, for example, but he definitely doesn't have Defiler mount. And Defilers are so crucial in this matchup, as they are in every Zerg matchup except ZVZ, obviously. But, you know, even if you would get the late game, then they'd be nuts in ZVZ. But you really need to get those Defilers out, and this is, you know, it's hard because StRyKER, his economy is always being pressured. You can see his drone count is bouncing back and forth from 50 to 30 to 40. He also has to keep making units. He's also broke. And Jaeyun, you know, smartly pressuring all sides of the map. He's at the bottom left and he's bottom right, expanding top left. He's doing so much to just keep the Zerg busy. And StRyKER just doesn't have that time to put down the Defiler mount to kind of like secure bases. Didn't have a Nidus at the 6 o'clock, so he's going to lose the 6 o'clock, unfortunately. And I feel like Jaeyun is slowly kind of establishing a stranglehold over this game. I can't really see how Zerg, if this keeps going, if Jaeyun keeps the pressure up, I just don't see how StRyKeR is going to come back from this.
Well, StRyKeR is doing a good job because top left got taken out. He still has top or bottom middle technically, but it is going to fall. But it's not like Jaeyun has taken a 5th base either. And now Jaeyun is actually move commanding up this ramp. He's got to be careful not to lose those units. Really, the only thing lacking for StRyKeR is really the Defiler mount, because if Defilers had ever come out during any of these moves...
Oh my god.
Oh, he's going to catch the majority of the Templars. That's going to be 4 Templars without casting a single... There's a big storm hitting a decent chunk of army. It's still 155 to 125, but imagine if we had any catch-up on these Protoss units. They'd be getting decimated by the heavy upgraded Zerg army, but for now, still no Dark Swarm, still no Plague. Protoss still needs to get a 5th base though, and it's actually StRyKeR that's now taking top left.
Yeah, and if StRyKeR can establish that base and get a Nidus there, you can see this is how the map is playing out. When Zerg expands to the bottom right and Protoss is forced to go there to kill the base, suddenly the top left side of the map is completely open, and Zerg really benefits from its from its mobility as a race in the situation. Nice storm goes down on the units that are sniping the Archon, and this is going to be really tough. The thing is, this hatchery is actually nowhere near done, so Jaeyun has a lot of time to go up there and kill that, make sure there's no Nidus. But if a Nidus actually ever gets up there, that's going to be really hard for the Protoss to clean up. It's a very hard base to attack because there's some ramps, and then you go down the ramp into a very small choke. And Jaeyun, he's going to try and take 6 o'clock, which is really interesting. I don't know if this is going to end up kind of being a blunder in the long run, because positionally it's not ideal. But here comes a storm drop.
Here comes a storm drop into the natural. It's going to wipe out a lot of drones, and actually getting bottom middle is the exact move that Jaeyun needs, because Eclipse is a map that you can split, but it's not a map that splits evenly. So once he secures bottom middle, more than likely that means he gets the other bottom right base, and that's going to put him 6 bases versus 5. And generally Protoss trades a bit more effective than the Zerg once all the high-tech units come out, like Storm, like Reaver, Maelstrom, those type of army comes. So if with an extra base, it's just gonna make it even harder for StRyKeR. He's gonna be on 5 versus 6. Here he's gonna try and fight this army, but this is a max Protoss army versus just 130 for StRyKeR with nothing behind these Hydras. Really, it's just lurkers that are playing defensive. There's no Plague, there's no Dark Swarm, there's no huge Ling follow-up at all. I think what StRyKeR needs to do now is try and draw the army to top left and then wipe out bottom middle. I feel like bottom middle is the most important base, because if we think about how long top middle has been running, it's approaching 10 minutes. There really can't be that much resources at these bases. It really is just bottom middle that matters.
Yeah, the problem is StRyKER's just took so long to get these Defilers online, and what really you would want to do is just leave your units kind of next to your high ground as Zerg, and then just constantly counterattack 12 o'clock as Protoss is expanding to the 6 o'clock position. Because with Dark Swarm and with the Protoss army kind of in the bottom right sector of the map, you would have had easy access to killing the 12 o'clock base. Now this base is completely unassailable without Dark Swarm. There's no way you're killing that without a Defiler. And just at the wrong time, StRyKER is going for these attacks, because Jaeyun catches them off position once again. He's going to be able to come in here into the Zerg's 4th base and completely kind of wreck it, meanwhile getting his army into the prime position to catch reinforcements. And I feel like StRyKER is going to take this fight, but it's going to be an absolute disaster for him. There's absolutely no way for Zerg to actually win this fight. Look, it's going up the meat grinding ramp. Protoss is just completely destroying every Zerg unit that's trying to climb up there, and I wonder if StRyKER even has a Nidus top left. It doesn't look like he does, and if he doesn't, this base is all but gone, and I just don't see any way for Zerg to come back into this game. Jaeyun has such sick macro going at this point, securing 6 o'clock, some 6 storms, big Protoss army with big upgrades, and it's just gonna be too much for StRyKER to deal with. And he's gonna be shooting himself in the foot, StRyKER is, because he was in such a nice position. All he had to do was use his hive, get that Defiler mount, get those Niduses out, and just never have the time, and he GG's out.
Yeah, so nicely done from Jaeyun here in typical Jaeyun fashion, out positioning, out harassing, interesting opener, even throwing me off. I thought it was going to be a 4-gate follow-up because if it gets scouted, that's a dead gate, 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
So a really interesting build from Jaeyun, and he just flat out outplayed StRyKeR that game. It's just that simple. And unfortunately, StRyKeR, who I think is a very strong Zerg, is going to be moving on to the losers match. Now, he's not out yet, but it's going to be very difficult because Dragon and Casper are also two very strong players. And they're going to be different races. Zerg or Protoss again, I guess, for StRyKeR. But then he's also going to have to go against Casper, who plays Terran. And Zerg versus Terran, for most Zergs, is way harder than Zerg versus Protoss.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to wait and see exactly who he plays in that losers match. But up next, we're gonna have Casper versus Dragon. It's gonna be an interesting match. Honestly, I'm gonna have to give the edge to Dragon. Dragon's just such a strong player, such a calculated player, and you know, if there's one thing I could see working against him is if Casper goes for some kind of like 2-base play, one, you know, kind of really aggro timing based play. But if it gets into that late game, man, it's gonna be so hard for Casper to do anything. But you know, Casper, again, strong player. I haven't really seen him play too much TVP. I guess we saw him play in the Race Wars, right, against Dawid. If you remember that, it was on Benzene.
I don't remember the race war because the thing that stands out for me for Casper is just this one game from last season on Sylphid where I'm pretty sure he had one factory and like 5 command centers. Like, this guy will just flat out play the greediest builds. I also remember a game where he was top left on, I can't remember the exact map, but he got away with the greediest 5 racks I've ever seen. But at the same time, Casper is one of the most aggressive players too. He's just in your face constantly, which is completely different from Dragon. Dragon plays how I kind of recommend a lot of Protoss players to play, which is just play defensive and get into your Arbiter tech and slowly build up stasis. He's actually reminds me of Boa. We saw Boa play yesterday. Unfortunately, Boa didn't play his greatest games, but when I think of Dragon, I think of Boa a lot because Boa also plays very defensive. We saw that yesterday. How aggressive was Boa at all in the early stages of the game? Not really. He kind of just plays Reaver style into Arbiters, and that's pretty much how Dragon plays. Now, Dragon can play multiple styles. He can play 2-base Arbiter. He can play carriers. He can play, you know, the macro game. He can split the whole map. He's the real deal. But compared to Casper, they are nothing alike. He will never gateway man you.
Yeah, I mean, Dragon, like you said, and there's not many Protoss players that play both Arbiters and carriers, especially in the non-Korean scene. But, you know, Dragon, you can put him on a lot of builds, but it's definitely generally going to be a very macro style. And Casper, like you said, very aggro. So we're going to have to see here in this best of 1 format what Casper can come up with to topple the big Dragon in this first game on Eclipse.
So in the top right, in the blue, it is our Russian Terran, Casper.
And in the bottom left, from Canada, probably the only Canadian left, right? It is Dragon, the red Protoss. But yeah, I guess since Crossy got eliminated, Dragon's the only Canadian left in this tournament.
Yeah, unfortunately, TT1 didn't play. And I think if TT1 had played, he was a contender to make top 4 because for sure he's one of the best Protosses, not just in NA, but in the entirety of the foreign scene. So that's a big loss to not have him in BSL. But Dragon's no slouch either, for sure. If you think of the best Protosses in Canada and in NA, there's only 2 that come to mind. It's TT1 and Dragon. Dragon made it into the round of 4 in previous BSLs. TT1 made it into the round of 4, I think, actually last season. So let's see what Dragon comes up with, because my experience versus Dragon is he'll just sit there, play kind of like how Terrans play the 2-1, just sit there, just nail their build. I don't think I've ever seen Dragon not nail his build. That's how good he is.
Yeah, Dragon's very consistent and just a strong player. And he's very kind of patient and positional, which in PvT is very important, because a lot of the times if you just take your time, you can force Terran to make mistakes. But sometimes I feel like, Dragon doesn't always have the most oppressive build orders, like I said, like you said, Nayokin, he's very kind of into that Arbiter tech. He's much more passive, so I feel like if Casper, aka Grind Boss, can, nail a really tight build off like 2 base or something, that could be, didn't Artosis play Dragon actually at some point? And I think Artosis actually won a game versus Dragon, or it might have been really close, I forget, but I remember seeing on Fighting Spirit Artosis just doing his signature 2-base builds against Protoss, and Dragon was struggling against it. So I forget if it was if Dragon lost or won that game, but I think that's maybe that could be one of his weaknesses. But Dragon going for that Zealot, early Zealot, no scout, kind of signature Dragon. He always does this in PvT. And if he gets this SCV for free, man, that would be terrible.
Yeah, this is going to be a catastrophe if he gets... Okay, it's already terrible for the Terran player. Now, luckily for Casper, since he's playing Dragon, the chance of this actually being something crazy like 1-base Robotic, 1-base Citadel is extremely low, but you never want to have that SCV actually die. If this was Ghost Suit Arc, I'm already asking for a regame, because I don't know what the heck is coming now. Is it double Nexus off of 1 Zealot? Is it 4-gate speed? What the heck is going on? And I actually think that this is not the type of build that you want to play versus Dragon, because he's going for an FD. Zealot's already out. When the Zealot pokes up here and sees that there's 4 Marines, he already knows what this is. This is an FD push, and I imagine that this is just going to be a second gate coming down, and generally 2-gate openers shut this down super easily. And I also noticed in the early stages that Casper actually went for an 11 gas, so his econ isn't the best either.
Yeah, but at the same time, I do like FD pushes against Zealot first, if you're not committed to doing any damage with it, if you just want to get out onto the map. Because when the Protoss goes for a Zealot like this early on, they actually don't have that many Dragoons, relatively speaking. And a lot of the times behind it, they're threatening sometimes DTs. So as Terran, if you're making a lot of Marines here like Grind Boss is, you can afford to just go for 1 tank into Vulture Mines instead of the usual 2-tank push, which means you can actually get mines out pretty comfortably onto the map, which means also you're covering one of the many builds Protoss could be doing behind that Zealot first, which would be DTs. So in general, and it looks like Grind Boss is just going to take his expansion, so I really like this. And exactly as I was saying, gets only 1 tank now with the Vulture production, and he's going to add his second factory. So overall, I really like this opening from Casper, playing very solidly. Dragon, of course, getting his expansion at a nice time, and he's going to have more than enough units to deal with this. But it's going to be annoying because, now, Terran's going to have Vultures out onto the map. Now, Mines is a bit delayed here, and, there's not much Grind Boss can do with this army. I hope he doesn't just attack, especially without Mines. That would be a complete disaster. Kind of pushing his luck here. I don't know if I really like this. Yeah, there's no way in his mind that he's going to go and kill the natural or anything like that, but I think he's just, making space, getting out onto the map. I think he probably forgot Mines, because you generally always have Mines by this time. So, but, those things happen. He's still going to have a lot of time to just get the Vultures out onto the map and mine up the map for some scouting. And, from here, both players are going to get into kind of a macro game. I wonder, the big thing to look out for is Protoss going to get that Citadel early to go for Arbiters off 2 base or take that 3rd base? And when's Terran going to get his Armory? Because the Armory timing is coming up soon.
Well, this was a really good move from Casper to move out and then turn around, because Dragon knew that this was an FD, and you can see the response he went for. It went for a 3-gate ob with a lot of Dragoons already made. So he really respected the attack from Casper. And when you said that Casper's not going to attack here, I just thought to myself, in what world is Casper not attacking? Because this guy, all he does is attack. So this was a really, really good move. And you can see the benefit of, okay, this is what I'm talking about, man. Like, how does this go through your mind? I'm going to fake an FD, Protoss is going to build 100 million units. Of course I'm taking a third base off of 3 tanks and 6 Marines. Like, what? You didn't think I was going to do that? If this third command center gets scouted, this is a dead base. So Casper, again, playing with fire here, trying to be as greedy as possible, and this could backfire. I really love the FD forcing out a lot of goons and then just pulling back, because there was a 5-worker lead, now only down to 4. But I don't know about this third base, but here come those 2 vultures. Luckily, Dragon already has 3 goons in position, so this really shouldn't do that much damage.
Yeah, it's just overall pretty interesting opening here. Unfortunately, Dragon lost, I think, 2 probes, 3 probes. But Grind Boss kind of skipped his armory to get this fast third. And Dragon, I think, misreading the state of the game a bit. I mean, crucially from that early game, I don't think he was able to see that Terran, he didn't know if Terran was on 2 factory, first of all. And he didn't know if Terran took an expansion. So I can understand why he produced a bunch of units here. And at this point, Grind Boss basically with a really sick read and just takes that third for free. Now, obviously, Terran's upgrades are going to be a bit delayed here, which is not something that you want to see. I mean, you can have all the econ in the world, but in the late game, especially once you get close to the max point for both players, you definitely need upgrades to actually outperform the Protoss player. And it looks like here, Dragon actually going for a +1 air and a Stargate, and Grind Boss scanned that. So I wonder if he was actually paying attention and seeing the core spin, and if he was, that was a huge win, because now he knows that Protoss is going for that carrier tech, and he has access so quickly to his third gas, so he's going to be able to pump out factories and Goliaths. But sometimes you scan that, and if you're not paying attention to see the core spin like some players, and you only see the Stargate, maybe he thinks this is Arbiters, but this is going to be carriers.
Yeah, so what do you think about this follow-up from Casper? Sure, he gets away with the third base for free. I don't know how it always happens that he gets this third base for free, but the follow-up is most likely going to be like 8-9 factory on +1. There's not going to be a +2 for quite a while. Do you think it can kill Dragon before he gets out critical mass carriers, or is this going to be a mistake from Casper?
I think this is going to hit in between the 2 to 4 carrier mark, right, like barely before 4 carriers, or it'll hit as the 4 carriers are finished, but they won't have any interceptors, and we're only going to have +1. And I don't know, man, like just in general, I think versus carriers, you don't always, with this really quick command center, right, with this really quick third, you can obviously TVP, you can always go for a timing like this, but versus carriers in general, I think it's okay to play a bit more passive and just get your upgrades going. But we know that Grind Boss delayed his armory significantly, and this is one of the drawbacks for it. I mean, suddenly carriers are actually really strong in this position because Terran really needs upgrades in this matchup, and so even if he hits a sick timing here, it's such a tight timing. Like the 2 carriers are almost done, and the other 2 carriers are going to be making, and once these 2 carriers are out, I mean, you need a couple Goliaths, and there's not much room to build turrets on. I don't think he even started Goliath range. I don't even know if he knows this is carriers, man. I mean, he's going to hit a timing here, but it's very, very narrow.
Yeah, well, if there's anybody that knows how to hit timings, it's going to be Grind Boss, because this guy, every time I watch him, just so aggro, and I actually do think this was a misread, because just now the Goliaths are starting to get pumped up. Actually, it looked like one of them was canceled. So, this is not StarCraft 2's, okay, we might actually have a mine drag on top of the tanks, but instead, Dragon's just going to force out siege and back off. But the first 2 carriers are coming out, still no Goliaths in production. And from what I know about Terran, for playing for 10 years, tanks do not hit air. They might be good on the ground. So once these first 2 come out, this is going to be Casper turning around. And without the powerful upgrades to rely on, he needs to pump out tons and tons of Goliaths, like maybe even like 20, just to deal with 3 or 4 carriers. Here comes Dragon. I actually think this is a bit of a mistake, but instead he's going to force the issue. Tanks should trade decently well versus these goons. Okay, there we go. Dragon is going to back off. No reason to attack with the ground if you don't need to. The tanks are just sitting there taking it.
And this is exactly what makes Dragon such a strong player. He took that fight so patiently, basically engaged the vultures only, cleaned the vultures up, and then pulled back his dragoons, and now he's going to go back in before the tanks get sieged and just clinically destroying this Terran army. He didn't even have to try, Jaeyun. Just such patience, such calculation from Dragon. This is really his strength in this matchup. Just, it really, you know, most Protosses that you play, they kind of have this 1 or 0 on or off mentality. They're just like, okay, I'm going, okay, I'm not going. But Dragon kind of always weaves in and out at the right time. Now he has 2 carriers with +1 upgrades, and Terran doesn't even have armor upgrades. So these carriers are gonna shrek through Terran units, and there's just nothing there for Grind Boss. I mean, once the thing is, it's so hard to play against carriers when you're behind like this, because now basically the Protoss army composition is just going to start getting stronger and stronger, and the Terran doesn't really have any compensation. Look, he's stuck at +1. He doesn't even have a starport, doesn't have a science facility, or at least if he does, he hasn't started +2. And if you don't have upgrades against, yeah, there's nothing here. There's no starport for Grind Boss, so this is going to be almost honestly impossible to win, because, you know, Dragon's gonna get up to that 4 carrier mark, scary, but then it's gonna be 6, then it's gonna be 8 with sick upgrades, and you know, once it's up to 8 carriers, you can be maxed as Terran. It's still gonna be really hard to deal with.
And the map is Eclipse, which makes it even harder. There's high ground all over the place. There's terrain that Goliaths just flat out can't engage the carriers on, like on the right side or the center of the map over the ramps and stuff. So it's going to be almost impossible for Grind Boss to bring this back. If he had 2-1 and had a trade like that, I would still like his chances. But the fact that there's no upgrades coming at all, I just don't know how you actually deal with this Protoss army. Here comes the ground force in combination with the carriers, Zealots getting on top of the Goliaths, tanks splashing some of the Goliaths, and now the Goliaths have to kind of bounce between attacking the carriers and the interceptors while also attacking the goons. Now, luckily for Grind Boss, there's enough tanks to deal with the goons, so he may actually hold, but look at how fast the Goliath just actually dies. Somehow he gets a carrier, but it's still 3, and that's still going to be enough, I think, to take down these Goliaths.
Damn, really impressive, actually. So maybe we're undervaluing Casper's position here. Remember, his 3rd base was so much faster than you would usually have in this matchup, that I think it's making up for basically donating that first army, because honestly, Dragon took no damage from that first push, and he essentially killed a whole control group of tanks for free, Jaeyun, in PvT. So how does Grind Boss have enough tanks to not die to the ground army there, but still have enough Goliaths to deal with the carriers? That's really impressive to me, and I really think that's off the back of his crazy kind of expo timing on the 3rd base. His economy is so much kind of more ahead than you usually would be in this position, and I guess because of that, Dragon had a misstep there. He lost 1 carrier, and losing carriers is such a big deal because they're so hard to replace, and now Grind Boss is going to have a nice timing here to basically deny Dragon's 4th base. And you know, damn, there's so many Terran units, and Dragon is kind of stuck at this 130 supply mark, 30 supply behind the Terran, and suddenly I guess maybe we're just being Terran casters now, and we think Terran's always losing, but it looks like Grind Boss is in a good spot.
Yeah, it just seems like Casper has too much. I was watching the probe count for Dragon for a long time, and it was pretty low, and we can see the effects of it. 30 supply down, another carrier goes down somehow, but Casper's not moving these tanks, so even though he's gonna lose or catch a 1 carrier, I think the whole army here is going to be wiped out, and that's a very expensive loss. But you see another blue line coming across the map. That's going to be an interception of Goliath. Casper is actually going to save some of his tanks, but now again, there's just so much Casper. There's like 15 Goliaths here, 5 tanks, and now the carriers are way far forward.
Yeah, this Dragon's taking so much damage onto his carriers, but you know, as long as he doesn't lose them, he's gonna be just fine. But it's gonna be so hard now because Terran's taking top left, taking mid left. He's got 20 SCVs on Dragon, and it doesn't matter that his upgrades are not where they would usually be at this point, because look, he's only, I mean, that's +2 16 minutes into the game. When 16 minutes into the game, some Terrans finish +3. It doesn't matter though, because his economy is so strong. He doesn't even need to make vultures. He's outproducing Protoss so hard. Usually you see Terran make a couple vultures to kind of supplement the ground army so they don't just get run over by zealots. But you know, he doesn't even need to do that. Just straight Goliath tank shows how far ahead he is economically and production wise. Now still, you know, Dragon's definitely not out of this game. He has a nice upgrade advantage on his air units. He's gonna get up to 6 carriers, and again, Terran's still not at that oppressive 3-2 mark. So, you know, with 8 carriers coming in here, I mean, 8 carriers can make magic happen, Jaeyun.
Yeah, 8 is when it starts getting really, really difficult for the Terran player to deal with. Protoss has also been consistently upgrading his carriers, so +3 weapon should be coming pretty soon, but this push looks so scary. But now Storm should be almost done. If he can blanket some of these tanks and Goliaths, he should have a fantastic trade. Terran's also attacking uphill, so this is going to be pretty difficult. But look at these 6 carriers actually not dealing that much damage, simply because there's just an overwhelming amount of Goliaths there. But the supply gap is kind of closing. That's still 40, but there's a 20 worker differential. No, you can't lose your carriers like that. Running forward and not firing. One goes down immediately. Second one almost falls, and a third one is very low. But does Casper have enough to actually push through? It looks like he might actually, but Storm kicks in, and those are great, blanketing a ton of the Goliaths. And for now, Dragon might actually push back Casper.
Yeah, those Storms are going to keep Dragon into his game. They're absolutely massive, actually cleaning so many of these Goliaths up, and once the Goliaths go down, so will the tanks. The carriers are still there. Somehow, you know, with 2 completely injured carriers, they're still alive, but now more Goliaths reinforcing this position, but just a bit too late, and it's not even a significant amount. If he does somehow get both, he gets both the really injured carriers, and that's massive, because now suddenly the Protoss's carrier fleet has gotten reset down to 5 carriers, and Terran's on 5 base, finished you know, building that top left and even saturated it. So this is going to be so hard for Dragon to win, especially because he lost those carriers. If he actually had 8 carriers here, or even 9 carriers, it doesn't really matter what position Terran is in, as long as you micro those carriers and take really good fights. I mean, you know, anything can happen. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for Grindboss, and maybe through his sick micro, that is, he basically targeted the low carriers. And the thing is, I mean, you know, Dragon has +2, right? +3 maybe on his carriers.
No, he has +3.
But he doesn't have armor upgrades. So if these Goliaths get on top of the carriers, they absolutely maul them.
Yeah, but it's so hard generally to get on top of them, but Casper's doing a fantastic job to actually take them down. Look at the heroic SCVs trying to save that base, but it does finally manage to come down. But now it's starting to get a little more interesting. Supplies are within 10 now. Remember, Casper for the majority of the game was up 30 to 40 supply, but now he has +2 weapon. His upgrade power spikes are starting to kick in. But Dragon has his 4th base up and running too, so it's 4 base versus 4 base. And now the carrier count, I think, is still at 5, maybe 7. May actually be 7 now. Okay, it's still at 5. But I'm liking Dragon's position a lot more now that he's finally got his 4th stabilized. He can potentially take top left also. And Terran definitely wants top left. Yeah, oh, he loses another carrier.
Yeah, he's just taking these fights when he doesn't really.
He's gonna lose another one.
If he loses another one, I mean, Dragon just needs to play a bit patient. You can see he's actually starting to come back in this game through his carriers, but losing them is not going to do him any favors. Finally, reestablishing the 4th base, and you know, Eclipse is such a hard map to attack on as Terran, especially up these ramps into carriers, into Storm. It doesn't matter how far ahead you are, you know, in terms of your army. Like the Storm just does so much in these situations, and attacking up that ramp is just so hard that I feel like Dragon can stabilize in this position. He's going to join the 2 carriers, 2 fresh carriers, going back up to 6. Dragon has yet to hit the big 8 carrier mark, and why is he attacking here? I mean, this is also hard for Protoss to attack into. just chill out, wait for your other 2 carriers, get up to that magic number, the big 8 carriers, you know, and play it from there. You basically deny the Terran base. Now he's gonna take this fight because he has the high ground to work with, but there's just so much Terran units. There's a lot of carriers, but just these Goliaths are underneath. And the thing is, in these specific situations, it's much harder to kind of focus down carriers because you're microing 2-3 control groups of Goliaths. And if you're kind of focused on one control group to snipe carriers, your other Goliaths start derping around and doing nothing. So, you know, that was a good fight for Dragon to take, but both players are kind of playing with fire here.
I think that Dragon might have done it, but I'd like to see him build around a Zealots, because the reason these fights are going so okay for Casper is there's nothing that can get on top of the Goliaths. There's nothing that, you know, forces the tank to just splash on top of Goliath. Now this is not the fight. He's attacking up hills. The storm is amazing. There's a lot of carriers now, multiple storms hitting so many of the Goliaths. And now look at this Goliath count just dwindle, but it also is a very low carrier count down to 4. But supplies are just so close, so back and forth. 155, but we finally see a breakthrough. Dragon has secured a supply lead. He's also down workers, so it's an even bigger army value for him. And he's taking bottom middle, while also, I think, denied top left. Another storm, but that's kind of a whip. Can't lose these storm, can't lose these Templars. Would really like to see some Zealots, though.
Yeah, and Casper managed to kill 2 carriers that made all that worth it, even though he lost a lot of his Goliaths. When he's trading Goliaths for carriers, he's going to be a happy man. And, you know, Dragon just this whole time has not gotten up to that 8 magic number of carriers that we keep talking about. And look, again, he's going to lose more carriers. He's actually going to lose a lot of the carriers here. They're just completely out of position. Oh, so lucky to not lose any more carriers. He's got 5 still, so a decent amount. But Crime Boss is so close with these Goliaths. If he focuses them down, he gets the injured ones, gets 1 down, gets 2 down, might get 3 down. 3rd goes down, and that's massive. Suddenly, Dragon just throws away the main strength of his army. I mean, you know, the supplies are close, but the thing is, carriers, they need numbers. And I think, you know, we were talking about, looks like Dragon was kind of getting a hold in this game, and now I feel like Casper is almost in an unlosable position. Resetting that carrier count is just so bad for Protoss.
Yeah, resetting the carrier count might have just won Casper the game. He's also hit +3, so he's got full upgrades now. And with only 2 carriers, that's I don't even care if you have 2 carriers. That's how weak they are. So Dragon is in a world of hurt, and the whole time it's only been 2 Stargates, and that's going to be another carrier going down. It might be all 2 of them, both of the carriers going down. It's not like he has 3 or 4 Stargates, so once these go down, it's going to be quite a long time to get up to 6. It's going to be like 7 minutes to get there. Now Goliaths are fighting on the high ground. Remember, they have +3 versus we don't even know what the ground army upgrades are. It's +2 weapon. Casper's just done it. He's done it. He's broken the 4th base. Sure, Dragon has bottom middle, but he's losing a lot of probes here too. And that's another carrier getting wiped out, and getting top left now gives him access to double gas. So he's going to have so much gas influx. And look at just the absolute madman macro from Casper. He's going bottom middle, and that's a sizable army too. He's now almost doubling the supply. There's nothing that Protoss can do to actually stop either of the armies.
Yeah, Casper is playing phenomenally this game. I mean, just bringing it back from that opening is really impressive. I mean, you know, as Dragon calls GG there, such crazy games, these 2 games. I feel like, I'm not gonna lie, Nayokin, but I think these 2 first games have been kind of the more high-skilled games that we've seen this whole tournament. They're definitely, I think they're the best 2 games we've seen just in terms of execution and builds, and they're just very close between the 2 players. So really exciting kind of to see. I mean, this group is pretty stacked, man.
Yeah, the group is stacked, and they're all relatively even in skill. I think everybody in this group is around the 2300, you know, mid 2300 to 2400 range. Literally anybody can get out of this group. You know, there's other groups where you say that and it's not necessarily true, but this is for sure a group where anybody can get out. Now, you know, I made a video on YouTube talking about the impact of upgrades versus carrier interceptors.
Yeah,
that doesn't matter if you just kill the carrier. Like, why attack the interceptor when you can just actually kill the carrier? For me, Well, I attack the interceptors because they're unkillable. The carrier itself is unkillable. But Grind Boss somehow always got on top of Dragon's carriers and never let him get critical mass. It was starting to get ugly once it reached 7, and then he instantly reset it down to 5, then down to 3, and then we went from 5 at the end down to what, 2? So Casper did an amazing job to focus down carriers, and it's not easy in the middle of fights to take a portion of your Goliath army and focus down any of the carriers. Generally, people are just 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, and whatever they fire is what they fire. So he's going to move on in impressive fashion. And now we've got 2 interesting matchups, Jaeyun versus Casper, somebody that's super aggro, versus Jaeyun, who is someone that likes to hide as many bases as possible. And then in the losers match, we've got StRyKeR with sick macro going up against Dragon, who's just been a staple of BSL. So in this match, who do you like between Jaeyun and Casper? Can Casper do something like that, or is Jaeyun gonna get away with murder like he generally does versus me, taking a 3rd base? Or what do you even expect from Jaeyun? He's somebody that can pull out almost anything.
Yeah, you can put Jaeyun on a lot of styles and builds, but I don't know, Casper really impressed me last game. He played a very, very, very solid game, completely kind of out macro Dragon. Now, I'll just say this really quickly. I think Dragon probably underestimated where Casper was at economically and production-wise. That 3rd base was so fast from Casper. And usually when you clean up that big army like that, you kind of just go straight into a win. So, it was Casper just through his build got so far ahead, but he managed to pilot that build so beautifully and just out-muscled Dragon that was really impressive to me. So, going up against Jaeyun, if he can have the same kind of result in TVZ. Now, TVZ is a bit harder than TVP in the sense that you can't just macro, you also have to micro. It's much more tight on execution. So we'll see if that translates to this matchup. And Jaeyun himself is actually really strong, just in general, but especially in this matchup as well. So we'll have to see. Reap the Storm is going to be the first map between Jaeyun and Casper. So let's get right into it.
So in the top right, coming off of a really solid win versus one of the best Protoss players in the foreign scene, it is Casper.
And in the 6 o'clock, we've got Jaeyun in the orange Zerg. And yeah, Reap the Storm, definitely not a map you want to see as Terran, I feel like. But at the same time, this is a good mech map. This is a good mech map.
This is a pretty good mech map, but I'm not too sure if Grind Boss is a mech player. I remember the one time that I did see him play TVZ, or maybe I've seen it a couple times, but the one that always stands out is just the one where he just 5 racks off of literally no defense. And luckily for him, Zerg didn't build any links.
Oh,
now this looks like an 8 racks, and I actually like Casper's chances versus someone like Jaeyun because Casper's going to bring it to you. Like, he's going to be in your face. And one of the hardest aspects about dealing with Terran as a Zerg player is managing your whoa, is this a wall? Okay, this is going to be a wall. For a second I thought this was going to be a 2 racks, but one of the hardest parts of dealing with the Terran as a Zerg is managing your drones versus somebody that is super aggro like Casper. You may be able to hold off the attack, but it's the follow-up that actually gets you. Like when 111 was very popular, you were talking about how it isn't even necessarily the first attack that kills the Zerg player. It's the secondary attack because it just keeps coming. Their econ is so ramped up, it's so powerful. If the Zerg doesn't manage their own econ, they're in big time trouble.
Yeah, and 8-racks in general, look, he's not going to go for the gas variation where you go for a very quick factory. So this is actually a very stable build. Like, it's not even all in, it's not cheesy. This is just an alternative way to play. It has counter, just because against 12 hatch obviously is the most ideal scenario, specifically against 2 hatch, because then Zerg has fewer drones to work with since they got the gas so much faster. And look, Jaeyun knows it's 8 racks, cancels the gas very smartly because you don't need that gas against this, and actually 3 hatch is much better. So Jaeyun gets a really good scout, and Grind Boss, he's gonna come out here. Now he has to get some damage done with this. You want to get a couple of drones. The ideal number is 4. If you get 3, you're happy with that. 2, 2, you're definitely behind. So it's gonna come down to the micro here. Now, can Jaeyun kill this Marine? And this is really good for Jaeyun, actually. He's getting really good engagement onto these SCVs, not taking too much damage. He's on the high ground. He's gonna get around the Marines. He's gonna lose 1 drone, goes down. 2 drones go down. 3 drones go down, but he kills both Marines, and he's gonna kill this Marine as well. So I honestly feel like this was a pretty even trade. You know, I can't really tell. I feel like that's a pretty even trade, Nayokin. I don't know how you feel about it.
I think that's an okay trade, and after seeing the drones around on the Marines, I thought for sure that this was just going to be a complete wipe and Terran get absolutely nothing. So Casper did a really good job when it mattered to focus down a couple of those drones because they were right on top of the Marines. Now we do see Casper is going into a somewhat fast gas as a follow-up. It's still on 1 barracks. There is no, he does have a command center, but this looks like it may potentially be delayed mech, but that is something that's very dangerous. If Zerg suspects that you're going for that, all of a sudden play like 2-hatch Hydra even works. Lurker busts are very dangerous. Now, I don't know if Casper is going to pull that out, but the gas timing looks like it could potentially be that.
I wonder if Jaeyun's just going to throw down a Hydralisk then. If he throws down a Hydralisk then, that would be such a sick read. This wall here from Casper, I mean, it's linked tight, but all the units, okay, and actually Jaeyun's going to go for the lair. So if you went for something like a Hydra bust, I feel like that would have been an insta win against something like this wall here, because the Marines pop out on the other side of the map, or on the other side of the wall rather, and it would be just so hard to defend and repair the wall, and there would be so many Hydras coming in, while basically, you know, Casper would only be able to be making vultures. So he doesn't even get the scout off. He does see that there's a sunken, which is a nice thing to see considering, well, the thing is, here's the thing, right? Jaeyun actually cleaned up those Marines without having to make too many lings. So overall, I actually think Zerg is actually in a really good spot. He didn't make that sunken just because he only ended up making 4 Zerglings, and, you know, to cover for maybe Vulture follow-up. But I feel like Jaeyun's in a good spot. Now, the thing is, build-wise, going straight for the lair and into the Spire, this is going to be very good for Grind Boss.
Yeah, I actually think Grind Boss is the one at an advantage right now because the 3rd base has been delayed quite a bit for Jaeyun. Luckily, he's going to take it relatively quickly for the opener, but Casper's somebody that will... Okay, this eBay... I think this is a mistake to show the eBay because, sure, even though Grind Boss isn't building any units at his racks, it could still be Raxes in the main, but with the eBay here, all Jaeyun has to see is whether the eBay is blinking or not. If it's not blinking, for sure this isn't bio. There's no way somebody's playing bio without upgrades. So now Jaeyun's going to have an easy read onto what this actually is. Now, Grind Boss I see is starting to put down 3 or 4 factories, so this is going to be a massive Goliath timing from him. And when you start having critical mass Goliaths, you know, 20, 30 Goliaths coming at you, you've got to have a ton of Mutalisks or a ton of Hydras to actually match them. It looks like Grind Boss is going to continue to put on the pressure. This is actually going to be a Vulture run by. Let's see how many drones he can actually get at the net.
Yeah, and this is coming at a really weird timing because the Mutalisks are basically going to be hatching. So Jaeyun's going to have just the Sunken for defense and the SimCity. Man, Casper, I really like how he's playing both these games. He's actually such a sick player, and he's going to come in at such a good time. Now, that's a 6 SimCity from Jaeyun, but he's still going to lose a lot of drones there. Really annoying, and as you said, Nayokin, Jaeyun's 3rd hatchery, his 3rd base was delayed, so it's not like Jaeyun has a lot of econ to work with. Meanwhile, Grind Boss is going that kind of delayed mech, which surprisingly it's just so strong economically, and so I definitely have to revise. I mean, at this point, obviously Casper is in such a good position, but you know, Casper, honestly, he's sick good, man. He's playing really well, getting those drones, getting his units up. Now he's gonna have enough. Look, he already has 4 Goliaths, 3 factories going. Dude, this is like the dream spot for Terran. Now I wonder if he's gonna go, it looks like he's gonna go for maybe a 1-1 timing or a very strong early +1 timing at least. I wonder if he's gonna go for more of a turtle style or just a 2 base timing attack style. What do you think? It looks like
Uh,
he's probably going for 2 base.
This is Casper. It doesn't even matter if I see his base. This is 100% going to be a timing. And I'm reminded of a game where he actually did the same thing. He just builds so many Goliaths off of 2 base. This is going to be +1. And luckily for Jaeyun, his third base is on high ground, so he can at least spam a ton of Sunkens there. He's going to have to spam a ton of Sunkens at his Nat also. Okay, that's not the ideal Sunken placement, but the only way he's going to be able to hold this, I think, is spam Sunken somewhere and just hope that his econ on the third bases can kick in. There's no way he can build Hydras or Mass Mutas to run this over. This is 4 fact. A lot of times when Terrans go for a timing with like 12 or so Goliaths with +1, it's only off of 2 facts. So if you think that in general it's going to be like 12 to 15 Goliaths, this is probably going to be 20 to 25 Goliaths simply because he has double the production. Like, this is just going to be a devastating attack coming in from Casper.
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel like, you know, if you really want to crack open Sunkens, even if it's in very small numbers, I mean, you still need that tank. You know, once that 1 Sunken or 2 Sunkens get into the fight with a bunch of mutas and stuff, I mean, you could have like 40 trillion Goliaths, but somehow those Sunkens just impale everything down. So, this is looking good for Casper, but at the same time, I will say this: Jaeyun is very strong against mech, and his macro is impeccable. So if Casper does not hit the timing properly, Jaeyun's just going to snowball out of control, and Casper's actually going for a hidden third base.
You don't say. Casper with a third base? Unbelievable. But it is very, very dicey to go for a timing. There's a reason that there aren't really that many timing attacks with mech play these days, because it's kind of like you win the game with it or you're in big time trouble. And Zergs have gotten so good with backstabs with their mutas to just erase mineral lines and then deal with the army, or buy time to get up queens, or buy time to get up enough hydras to actually overwhelm it. Now we actually see Casper is doing some type of hybrid move where he's gone a lot of Goliaths, but he's also getting his science facility. So he is actually going to be transitioning into +2 weapon relatively quickly. So this is kind of weird because it looked like for sure this was going to be a timing, but also last game it looked like for sure he's going to attack with this FD, and it never happened. So he may be assuming that, okay, Jaeyun's building up his defense quite a bit, and instead I'm just going to macro, but we actually don't see that. Jaeyun really didn't overbuild Sunkens anywhere. He's just continuing to power. Look at the drone to SCV count, 42 to 50. That's actually pretty good for Zerg.
Yeah, I feel like Jaeyun's slowly getting into a nice position, and he was getting his +1 air.
Dead base.
+1
Oh
attack.
no! Catastrophe! And the gas is just barely out of range. He's missed it by like a pixel. Oh, and he missed his SCV transfer. Oh, okay. He saw it. Did he actually see it though? No, he didn't actually see it. So nothing going right for Jaeyun this game, and everything going well for Casper. That's going to be a free third base, and it's a free third base with a gas, which is just going to make his mech army even stronger.
Yeah, but here's the one thing I have with Casper. I mean, you know, he was playing amazingly, but you know, Terran mech, it's not just pure Goliath. You know, he literally has only Goliaths, and I mean, Goliaths are strong early, but you really want to get into tanks. Tanks are what are really strong about mech, and you really want to start making vessels. So this is only Goliaths here. Now, if Jaeyun takes this fight, it's probably going to be okay for Grind Boss, but as time goes by,
I think this is an amazing fight for Jaeyun.
Yeah, it could be. He's hitting right before there are any tanks, and actually, this is such a good composition for Jaeyun because the Hydralisks are not getting touched, and they're outputting a ridiculous amount of damage, while the Mutalisks are basically tanking most of it, and he's just going to be able to break through here. No, you're totally right, Nyokin. Because there are no tanks, I mean, Jaeyun's getting such value. Even if he doesn't end the game here, he basically is resetting the Terran mech army, and behind this, he's going to get his fourth. Now, the problem with this situation for Jaeyun is that he did miss that third base. So now, I mean, Casper's on 3 base. He's going to have sick income to kind of rebuild his army that usually you wouldn't have as Terran. And Jaeyun's only going to be on 4 bases, but he doesn't even have that 4th base up and running. So, you know, that was a good trade for Jaeyun, but was it enough?
I think the trade was actually kind of so-so for both players, because even though the Goliath count got reset quite a bit. Also, Jaeyun lost like 20 mutalisks there. That's a lot of mutas to lose. But Jaeyun, in typical Jaeyun fashion, has started to power really hard. He's on like 7 batteries now. He's got his 4th base up. Vulture run by, gonna wipe out a handful of drones. A really nice catch from Casper there. But he shouldn't be feeling that great, seeing that Zerg has gotten up 4 bases now. Meanwhile, he's still only on 3, but one of the saving graces for him is his SCV count is really killer, up at 63. He needs to start thinking about taking top, middle, or the middle only, though. And something that you were mentioning, the lack of tanks, well, that's not going to be a problem for much longer because he's going triple or quadruple add-on. So if the trade we thought was kind of pretty good for Jaeyun last time with the mutas and hydras, that's not going to be a similar scenario if he goes in for his next attack. And also, he doesn't have any mutas anymore to buffer.
Yeah, the combination of Casper getting a couple drone kills there, and the fact that he has his 3rd base untouched means that he's actually in such a good position. He just has such a sick economy, and he's outpacing the Zerg economy significantly. And Zerg really against mech really relies on that economic advantage that just isn't here this game. So it's not like Jaeyun can outproduce the Terran. They're literally probably going to have very similar production, in which case the Terran mech army is going to be much stronger, obviously, because it's just going to be much more cost efficient. So Casper is actually in a very good spot, mostly off the back of that ninja expand. Jaeyun unfortunately did not scout that, and also Casper with some sick Vulture harassment just in general. Look, he's still moving around the map with vultures, making sure Jaeyun's not over expanding, and Jaeyun's kind of stuck on 4 base. Casper's taking his 4th base and has such a sick army. And the thing is, you know, as we get into the higher supply counts here, you know, Casper's getting up to 150 supply, 160 supply. Zerg can't really fight against that without queens. It's funny to say, but queens have really become a staple of this matchup, and you really need them to kind of clear the tank count and even out the fight. And if you don't have them, and if you're just running Hydra Mutalisks at basically a big Terran blob, the Terran blob is gonna absolutely destroy it.
Well, Terran's reached +2 weapon now, and +3 weapons coming in pretty soon. He's up to like 9 factories. The only thing lacking from his army is really vessels. Everything else is fantastic. He's got almost critical mass tanks. He's got 5 right here. So Hydras are really going to be evaporated very quickly. We saw that Jaeyun has started to rebuild his mutas, but one thing that I noticed was he only had +1 armor. Maybe he has +1 weapon about to finish, but he does have +2 armor. So actually they are heavily upgraded, but that's a lot of Goliaths in the army too. I don't know if there's actually going to be enough. Okay, actually that's not a lot of Goliaths. That's only 5. So this is actually going to catch Casper completely off guard. Still, we see 10 more coming in to support these 5 Goliaths, but this is like 30, 40 mutalisks. This is going to be a big change of the game with this single move. This is going to be the entire army of Grindboss, I imagine, getting wiped. Holy moly, that's a lot of mutas.
Yeah, Jaeyun's so smartly transitioning back into Mutalisks because Grindboss has had no vessels, and he's getting on top of the Terran mech army, and he's just absolutely going to destroy this army. There's really not much to say here. Casper can't really do anything about it, and the reality is that, you know, going into this stage of the game, like, Mutalisks are actually always good against mech, because Mutalisks actually do fine against Goliaths, right? Like, especially if they're even upgraded. And, you know, just in general, Zerg's going to have enough resources to afford so many Mutalisks that you just can't keep up with Goliath production. And so once you get into this mid game, you really need to add vessels to your composition. Vessels are really what eventually limit the Zerg from getting out of control in terms of the air production. And Grindboss just never actually made vessels this game, and Jaeyun correctly identified, hey look, Grindboss, you know, he's only making mech units, he's only making tank vulture Goliaths, he has to balance his army out. I'm just going to overcommit on making Mutalisks and going to completely run him over, and that was the correct call. And suddenly we're talking about how Casper was in such a good position to win this game, and Jaeyun's basically going to clutch it out here, I think.
Well, there is a lot of turrets set up, and there are 9 factory productions, so Goliaths will come out in considerable numbers very quickly. And you got to be careful when you go into mutas, because sure, mutas are great, but they're very expensive. If you go too hard on the mutas and they don't trade effectively, you know, that's 100 minerals, 100 gas every single time going down the drain. And it looks like the Goliaths are actually gonna take out these Mutalisks, and they are very high upgraded Goliaths too. They're 3-2, but Hydras at the front wipe out some tanks. Jaeyun has a 20 supply lead, and now he started to switch into Hydra production, and now with the lack of tanks, because he knows there's only Goliaths coming out, this might just be the killing blow for Jaeyun if he can get up critical mass Hydralisk.
Is this Brutal or is this Starcraft 2? Because you look at the production tab and he's queuing like 20 plus Hydralisks, just rallying them across the map, and it's just going to be so hard for Casper to really stabilize. The only problem here is that, you know, Jaeyun took that massive advantage and he killed more units as the Radiate is getting researched. So eventually Casper is going to have an answer to kind of the mass error. But Jaeyun, okay, he's going to actually deny 12 o'clock from coming online. So at least he did some economic damage. He did kill the mineral only as well. So, you know, he killed the bases. That's exactly what you need to do. Kind of wasted some time having those Mutalisks fly over the factories, but still got some worthwhile trades there, keeping the Terran army low. And now basically Casper is only on 3 base, but he's about to mine out his natural. I think actually his main is already mined out. So Casper's on 1 base really. Meanwhile, Jaeyun is still on his 5 bases, being Zerg. You know, just Zerg doesn't mine out their bases as much because they can spread out their workers more evenly. So Jaeyun's just in a phenomenal position off the back of that Mutalisk switch, and I don't really know what Casper can do.
It looks like T came out for Casper. Not sure what that means. Maybe TT is what he wanted to type out. And I think if Casper had 1 more base, he would still be okay. But the fact that this is now going to be eliminated, and the fact that he's mined out in the main and natural, this is just over now. It's 5 bases versus no base mining pretty much for Grind Boss. Despite taking the 3rd base for free, Grind Boss or Jaeyun actually still overwhelmed Casper. Casper's not out yet, but now that it is gonna be split map in favor of Jaeyun, it's almost impossible to recover. There's no chance for Grind Boss to put on any counterattack pressure to prevent mid left from going to Jaeyun. The really only hope that Grind Boss can go for is to try and take mid right, just literally camp out the entire game for the rest of for like 30 minutes and try and pull it back. You can see how desperate he is. Floating a command center going to try and take mid right. So look how many Hydras there are, and they're heavily upgraded too. What are they, like 2-2 right now? But the Terran upgrade is 3-2, so both players really nailing their upgrades. Really impressed with both players, but I think there's just too much Jaeyun.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is, Terran, like, Zerg has so many resources to work with. Even if we can imagine like a completely botched attack from Zerg, first of all, the supply lead is so significant that double Ultralisk Cavern, you don't see this every day. Supply lead is so significant that Zerg's gonna trade no matter what, and even then Zerg's gonna have so much resources to rebuild their army. Meanwhile, Casper kind of pitifully mining off of 1 base. Now Casper's standing army is still quite impressive. A number of tanks and Goliaths. Actually has a Radiate to work with now, or D-Matrix if he chooses to use that. He's gonna float his main command center to take this 4th base, but his army is just not in position, and I feel like Jaeyun can just run here and maybe snipe his command center. And if he snipes his command center, I mean, Casper is not gonna have another base for a long time here, and it's just, I mean, there is a world where Casper wins, because look, this army is still scary. He has really good upgrades. He can get some really sick trades if Jaeyun kind of gets complacent and takes the wrong fights, but it's really hard to imagine, you know, Zerg losing from this position. He's even getting consumed, double Ultralisk upgrades and consume in every hive tech thing you could have.
Yeah, and Casper's just broke. He can't afford to even build a command center, so he has to have the best trades possible. And with Dark Swarm, that's just going to eliminate that possibility, because only tanks are going to be able to deal damage under it and irradiate. So this is a really smart move from Jaeyun to transition into Dark Swarm, also going into Ultras. But that's a lot of tanks, even though Grind Boss or Casper really isn't mining very well. 150 supply uphill with mass tank with a ton of mines and a ton of Goliaths supporting it. He's going to trade very well, but is it too much? Here comes Jaeyun again. The tank line is pretty deep, but unfortunately, it's too deep, and that leaves room for the Hydras to just scoot on by into the main. And we already know that they are super heavily upgraded, so these factories may actually get taken down. But this might have been a huge blunder from Jaeyun, because the tanks are shelling out so much damage. About half of the Hydras are already gone. Vultures on the high ground with mines are dealing a decent amount of damage, but still about 25 Hydras remain. Not anymore, maybe only like 12. And this all of a sudden is not that bad for Casper. Look how much actual Hydras he killed.
Yeah, but and the thing is, Casper is taking another base, but look, Jaeyun's just taking his side of the map, adding more hatcheries. Now Ultralists are going to come out. The thing is, Ultralists are not very good versus mech, but when you can produce them in such quantities, I mean, the thing is, if you have the economy, they're great. They're just gonna, they're a great way to kind of translate a very huge economic lead. But look, Jaeyun doesn't actually have melee upgrades, so these lings are gonna take a long time to chew through any Terran units. Still, gonna kill these Ultralists. He's gonna deny mining. I mean, it really doesn't matter what Zerg does, honestly. The more I look at this, you know, you could talk about how, you know, these Ultralists, they're not really gonna do much, but the lead is just so significant for Jaeyun. I mean, we saw yesterday Boa kind of in a similar dominating position against Terra almost through the game a number of times. It's starting to get flashbacks to that, but the thing is, here it's just so much more apparent, the lead that the Zerg has, that it's really just hard for me to even envision a game state where Terran comes back. I think Jaeyun can just do whatever he wants, honestly.
That is a lot of Ultralists, and that's a lot of tanks, but unfortunately it's not going to be enough, especially if Dark Swarm comes down. But Casper's trading about as well as you possibly can, but more Lings supporting it, and yeah, now the Ultras get on top of all the tanks with Dark Swarm. That means the Goliaths can't deal any damage, and this is going to be Jaeyun moving on into the round of 16, taking down Casper. Casper looks very strong though, and may actually be the favorite to come out of the group in second place, but for now Jaeyun's the one that's going to make it out of Group E. Well, I thought he was. It's for now, the game's not over, but you can see that there really isn't much left for Casper, only 37 workers, and meanwhile Jaeyun just has like infinite amounts of hatcheries. Lings are trading extremely well, going to take down that tank. Oh, actually, they don't deal any damage because they don't have any upgrades. And +3 wet armor versus when the Lings only deal 5 damage, they only deal 1 damage to that tank. So really, only Ultras and Hydras can deal damage right now.
I mean, I don't even know what to say, Nyokin. This is almost giving me a heart attack. I don't understand why Jaeyun just doesn't make Hydralisks like a, you know, make the units that he's upgraded the whole game. Like, this Ultraling, it's still gonna work, but this is the way you throw games. I mean, you can't just switch to a unit that has 0 attack against +3 armor mech. Like, even if the Ultras and the Lings get on top of the mech units, like, this guy could probably just go pure Goliath and kill those units. So just so strange, such a strange tech switch from Jaeyun, when really he could have just massed a bunch of queens, kept going Hydras, kept going Mutalisks even, and instead chooses to go for Ultralists. And it's just so questionable. But at the same time, I mean, I sound like a broken record. It's just so hard to see Zerg losing. It doesn't really matter what Zerg does. Still getting trades. He can trade basically at this point almost 6 to 1 supply. He can take like a 60 supply deficit trade for like 10 supply of Terran units, and the production is such that he's still going to come out on top. So it's just so hard for Casper to do anything now. He's doing what he can do, which is basically keep making units, stay on these bases, put down mines. But look, if Jaeyun just decided to make Mutalisks, if he decided to make anything but Ultraling, he would instantly win the game. But he's sticking to this Ultraling. I'm waiting to see for it actually to bust down at some point. This Terran kind of choke, but still, he's probably only going to have +1 melee at this point. That's just such a weird game suddenly.
Well, Jaeyun's trying to find the correct path, because clearly the high ground to the third base is not the route to take. There's so many tanks there. I think he needs to just go for the main again like he did with the Hydras earlier. Look how far forward those tanks are. They don't support any of the Ultras if they just run directly into the main. Another drop, gonna try and get in there, but it's already denied. And as you were saying, trades like we've been seeing are how you throw the game. If Jaeyun wants to... Okay, here we go. This is going to be the Ultras trying to just end the game right here. So many coming in. Drops going into... Okay, he just runs by, as I said. Dark Swarm going to come in, get on top of those tanks too. So those are going to be eliminated. And now, with Ultra Ling into your main, there's no armor on these factories. So even if Lings don't have any upgrades, these factories are all going to be eliminated. Also, potentially going to supply block him. And now, I think finally, we have the killing blow into Casper.
Yeah, I mean, now Casper basically won't be able to produce anymore. He still has a decent standing army defending his bases, but who cares about your economy if you can't actually spend it? And Casper's going to have to come back to defend, but Jaeyun has just so many units. Dark Storm on top of on top of the mech units. Ultra Ling all over the map, coming in and out, even into grind bosses, mineral only. There's still some mines there. Look, those Lings can barely kill a Goliath. It's just, Lings are so pitiful when they don't have any attack upgrade or attack damage, and mech units are just so sturdy with that +3 armor. So, you know, it's still gonna take a while here. Casper can still hold on just through the power of his units. Again, Jaeyun at any time could just make Hydralisks or Mutalisks and this game would be over, but sticking to Ultra Ling, and yeah, there you go, Grind Boss finally with the GG.
So Casper is going to tap out, and Jaeyun is going to move on to the round of 16, but it wasn't easy. And Casper looks surprisingly good and looks like he might be the actual second favorite to make it out of Group G. I think we're in Group G. Yes. So many groups, man. Like, not used to having this many groups. Yeah. But now our next matchup is going to be the losers match, which should be StRyKeR versus Dragon. But before we get into the losers match, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to bring that to you and see who's going to face Casper in the last chance match and determine who's going to be our last round of 30 or round of 16 advancer from Group G.
And he's going in. This is a really good engagement actually from Avilev, getting a couple onto the ramp, and the Sunken's doing work though. They're both equal supply. Zerg has one more drone, and Avilev has a position here up on the ramp. So look at this arc, beautiful arc from Avilev. He's going to completely destroy this attack from Zerg. Avilev has a really good timing. Look how many Lings. There's only one Sunken. Avilev is just chewing through Zerg's defenses. The Sunken's gonna go down. Zerg has more Lings coming in. The one Sunken finishes. It's gonna be really close, Nyokin. You might die here. He has one Mutalisk out though, so that's gonna help with the DPS. And again, Avilev, he knows he has to go at some point, but Zerg is always in such a great defensive position. The Sunken taking so much of that Ling DPS from Avilev's Lings, and finally one Mutalisk is out. Now this Mutalisk, oh, he just GG's. Yeah.
This drone is very funny. He might actually try and Sunken rush here if he can get it down. But that drone, there it is.
Dude,
there's the
oh my
colony.
God. Avilov was doing such a good job. Avilov here, he has to pull drones, but if he defends this, he's going to be at a second hatchery advantage, and he'll be able to completely flood Julia out of this game. But he can't lose too many drones, because otherwise he won't have the economy to actually produce, and he's going to open himself up to basically counter attacking from Julia. So he still has to stay back. Now Julia taking some trades here. I don't know if this makes sense, because he knows that basically Avilov is on 2-hatch production, so
it looks like actually
like, he
Avilov.
can't lose drones. He can't lose drones. If Julia loses any drone here, it's going to be massive for Avilov. And Avilov is just pushing through these lanes. The Sunken is actually doing a lot of damage. But if he gets one drone goes down, if he gets another drone, this is basically game over. I mean, it's already game over, really. Look, 12 drones against 6 drones, 5 drones only. And now, basically, Julia can't make anything. Yeah, and he just leaves.
We are back. We just saw Jaeyun get out of Group G in first place, taking out Casper, but Casper looks surprisingly strong. But now we're going to see the battle that I want to see. Is it Canada or is it USA that is the stronger foe here? Is it going to be StRyKeR that moves on to face Casper, or is it going to be Dragon and we're going to have a repeat or a rematch of some craziness that we already saw in Eclipse, Casper versus Dragon, some of the craziest carrier and Goliath play I've really ever seen. The Goliaths getting so many kills onto the carriers. Casper's looking really good, and his TVZ is no slouch either. So I think regardless of who comes out from this match is going to have their work cut out for them to take down Casper. But who do you think is the favorite here? Is it going to be newcomer StRyKeR, or is it going to be the tried and true Dragon?
Yeah, I mean, this is gonna be a hard matchup to call. I think, you know, best of 3, again, Dragon has that experience advantage for sure. He looked very, I mean, he looked strong against Casper. Again, we have to go back to the bill orders, the opening bill orders for that game. Casper just with such a, you know, such a huge lead just off the bill orders alone. So it's hard really to judge where Dragon is. Like, we saw Casper kind of dominate him in a macro game, but, you know, it really does go back to the openings they chose to do. So not very indicative, I feel like, of Dragon's actual skill level right now. Now, StRyKeR looked very strong against Jaeyun in terms of his macro, in terms of his production, in terms of his economy management, but positionally got caught out so many times, time and time again. Jaeyun was able to kind of outmaneuver him, and that's exactly what Dragon likes to do. He's such a positional player. He's such a smart player that I feel like stylistically, you know, after watching that game, it looks like, you know, I would say Dragon is in a good spot here, but at the same time, PVZ is not PVT. It's a much more mechanical matchup. It's a much more demanding matchup for the Protoss player, and StRyKeR is just such a force in macro games, just makes so many units that I feel like he's going to be able to push Dragon. So really, to me, this could be anyone's series.
For sure, StRyKER's got a good chance of getting out. So does Dragon. So our next map is going to be on Optimizer. Let's see, is it going to be Canada or is it going to be USA moving on to face Casper in the decider match? So in the top left, in the gray. It is the Canadian Protoss. It is Dragon.
And in the bottom right, it is the American Korean Zerg. It is StRyKeR 17. And yeah, Optimizer is going to be our map. First time we see Optimizer today. Quickly, you know, this map is kind of weird because it has two gases in your main. One has 4,000 gas, one has 1,000 gas. And there's also an extra 4 mineral patches at the natural that equal to 1,000 minerals. So basically the idea is you get 1,000 minerals to work with and 1,000 more gas to work with, because you get that 1,000 gas of efficiency off that double gas. So just basically meant to optimize your build orders, but they can also be meant to you know, go for some crazy one base kind of crazy creative strategies. There's a lot of stuff that can happen on this map, but it's also a much more standard map than the crazier maps we've seen. We talk about like New World or Sparkle, or even the current map in ASL that has the backdoor expansion. Even that one's kind of a standard map. So yeah, I don't know. What do you expect to see from this first game, Jaeyun?
Well, as I was stating earlier, that Dragon is pretty much as standard as you get, and PvZ is definitely a matchup where you must know your build. Luckily, Dragon, I don't think I have ever seen him not hit his build. So I think if you're just going to play standard play and try and go from there, I imagine this is just going to be one gate, Stargate, into standard Citadel follow-up with maybe DT. Maybe we're going to see a 730 tank. Most of the time these days we see DT follow-up. But other than that, I don't think we're going to see any type of one gate, 4 gate follow-up from Dragon, even though last season he pulled off a really sick 2 Archon push with his 4 gate Speed Zealot versus Eon Zerg and knocked Eon Zerg out. So that's also a potential build in his arsenal. But I don't know. I think that you got to be aggressive versus StRyKeR, because despite Jaeyun dealing that chaotic blow to him in the early stages that we saw earlier, he still recovered very well. He got up to 45 drones, got his 4th base. Everything looked fine. So I think if Dragon wants to take down StRyKeR, he's got to make it crazy. But instead, we see Forge expand into Nexus, and I already like StRyKeR's position here because nothing's going to happen to him.
Yeah, StRyKeR, yeah, it's really hard to say because Jaeyun, I feel like he had the right idea there, going for kind of the mix-ups on his builds and just for being very hyper aggro against StRyKeR. And I think the one, you know, when we see StRyKeR falter, it's definitely when he has to deal with these early pushes, when he's put into uncomfortable situations. If you do play kind of like a slower game against him and give him space to just macro, he's such a scary force. And I feel like, you know, opening Forge expand like this is exactly what StRyKeR would want to see. But at the same time, Jaeyun did himself open Forge expand last game, and after that he mixed it up. So still not set in stone exactly how, you know, what Dragon is going to do. He could still branch out in many ways here. Looks like he's getting his gas, and he's banking a lot of minerals, probably throwing down his 4 off of 1 cannon. So his tech is actually going to be really fast here. And StRyKeR himself looks like he's getting gas already, so he's going to go into lair tech himself. I feel like Dragon's tech is outpacing StRyKeR's tech slightly, so he's going to have a nice opportunity to do damage with Corsairs if he chooses to go for Corsairs. But if he does go for Corsairs, it's going to be indicative of a more kind of passive macro style, which is what StRyKeR would want to see.
We do have the gas going down for Dragon at about 28 supply, so this is generally, I think, going to be Stargate follow-up.
Yeah.
If you're going to be rushing it's not necessarily a rush gas, it's kind of in between rushing the gas and not rushing the gas. It's kind of middle of the road here. But Optimizer, I think this is definitely going to benefit the Protoss player quite a bit, because even if you are going to have a depleted gas after you mine out the initial 1,000 gas, any amount of extra gas income is really going to benefit the Protoss player. That's going to allow them to get out just that many more Templars. There's the Stargate as expected. Dragon, despite getting a full scout off, just feels more comfortable going into the Stargate. And I think that this Stargate is actually pretty damn fast in comparison to the lair, so this might get multiple Overlord kills. Zealot at the bottom just being annoying, but so far no kills. and it should get cleaned up relatively easily once he puts down or gets out a couple more lanes. Okay, maybe not, because Zealot into the natural now, and now it's starting to get very weird, just like we saw in the Jaeyun game.
Yeah, Dragon kind of getting some nice harassment after the Forge expand. Still, you know, just because it's Forge expand doesn't mean you can't make these Zealot plays, because the Zerg, once they scout the Forge, they know they can just drone up, and as Protoss, you want to always be interrupting that in this matchup. Now StRyKeR going straight for the Hydralisk speed, and it doesn't look like he's making a Spire at all, so this is going to be really good. Actually, he doesn't even have a lair. Yeah, he does have a lair, but okay, this is very weird from StRyKeR. He's actually choosing to skip the Spire to get down his lair, I mean his hatcheries that much faster, get his Hydralisk upgrades up. And you know, that's a cool kind of variation on your build. You know, the Protoss that isn't used to that, you're not going to be expecting kind of the production and the economic output that brings with it. But at the same time, I mean, you know, Dragon's going for this Corsair +1 style, and you know, if there's no Spire to kind of counteract that, and the Corsairs have free reign, that's really good for the Protoss. Now, he still isn't making any more Corsairs. I think he's just going to bank the +1 upgrade on his air units for later in the game if he ever needs to switch into Corsairs. But I think he's actually going to, you know, he's scouting. He's only made 2 Corsairs. He's identified, I think, that StRyKeR actually doesn't have a Spire. And instead of making more Corsairs, look, he actually had a Corsair in production and just canceled it. Instead, he's going to add a bunch of gateways, get his Storm going, and he's going to go into very quick kind of ground army. But the thing is, StRyKER's going to hit a sick timing here off the back of cutting his Spire. There's only 2 cannons out in front of the Protoss's natural, and you know, StRyKER already has Hydra speed, he has Hydra range on the way, he has 5 hatcheries finished. This is scary territory for the Protoss player.
Yeah, but I think this is a bit dangerous for StRyKER because speed is already done, Storm is about to finish, and this is a 4 or 5 gate follow-up. I don't think that there's the overwhelming amount of Hydras that StRyKER usually has. I feel like Dragon's probably going to easily deny this, and then what does StRyKER really have to deal with it? Sure, he's going to have a lot of Hydras, but the Stargate or the Corsair count is going to start getting really high. It's going to be hard to balance dealing with the Sayers and also dealing with the Zealots when you don't have any Scourge at all. There's still no Spire. Storm is almost done. First few Templar should be coming out pretty soon. 6 gate actually for Dragon. Everything going well for him. I didn't see if he had +1 weapon, but I don't think, oh, he does have it. DT into the bottom base, gets a decent amount of kills, but not game-ending damage. Still, drone count is relatively high, 40 for StRyKER, so his econ's actually very good. So overall, it seems like we're still in a bit of a even state right now.
Yeah, just such a weird situation to be in. I think StRyKER went for that early Hydra timing. The thing is, he made so many Hydralisks way before the Protoss actually pushed out, so that's definitely not something that the Zerg wants to do. But look at how much stuff Zerg gets just from skipping something like a Spire. Getting those hatcheries that much faster meant that he could afford making units, but look, his drone count is out of control as well, so really his macro is already kicking off. Now the thing is, not having a Spire is going to be a liability going into mid-late game, especially if Dragon chooses to go for stuff like shuttle harassment. But you know, only now getting his Robo, and Lurkers are already out, so even if Dragon pushes out here, he's not going to be able to do any damage against StRyKER, and Dragon himself taking a 3rd base. And I feel like this is exactly the kind of game StRyKER wants to play. He's not getting pressured, he's not facing any kind of push, he's just being let to just macro, take his side of the map, take the bases he wants to take, and this is going to look really strong for him. I mean, his supply is very even here with the Protoss player, and he's gonna have so much room to work with as Dragon finally finds kind of a weak base here. There's no Zerg units in position just yet. The Zealots get on top of the hatchery. Now the thing is, he can't lose these Templar for free, and StRyKER already snipes 2 but loses a significant amount of Hydralisks, and at this point those Hydralisks are
they're all valuable because he spends so much time droning up. He doesn't have all the larvae in the world to just remake units. Now he needs to snipe these Templar if he wants to have any chance at defending this base. And 6 Storm from Dragon. Now a Lurker gets into position, but just outside of the hatchery range, and Dragon's just gonna go for it, and 6 Storm onto the Hydralisks. Now there's no way that this hatchery is actually gonna remain alive, so Dragon, with a nice play there, actually denies StRyKeR's 4th base as he takes his 3rd base. So as I was saying, you know, this is the kind of game StRyKeR wants to play, but Dragon coming in with the slick attack.
Yeah, I thought that StRyKeR was actually going to hold the attack very easily because he rushed lurkers. And if we think about the Jaeyun game, Jaeyun didn't have an observer until the 12-minute mark, and already lurkers are out at around the 10-minute mark. So there was a real chance that that attack would have done 0 damage. So really nicely done from Dragon to end up sniping that base. But he's got to be worried for a counter drop because that's already researched for StRyKeR. Also, he already has speed on his overlords. We don't know if those are already loaded up, but if there's no defense at mid-left, this base is going to be wiped off the map very, very quickly. And it looks like there must be units already loaded up. No, I don't think there are. But there's 6 overlords here ready and waiting to be loaded up. And I think StRyKeR just wants to put pressure on. Oh, here he goes. He's going to try and push the issue, but I think this is a bit of a misstep. There's so many Dragoons here. Takes out the lurkers very easily. Hasn't even used a storm yet, and he still easily takes it down.
Yeah, StRyKeR overextending a bit there. I think, like you were saying, Jaeyun, or at least you were about to say, it looked like StRyKeR wanted to just put pressure at the front of Dragon and then just pull back afterwards to set up for a drop. So just tactically a good play, but kind of over eager, and he doesn't have the army quite yet to pressure the Protoss like that. And Dragon was already in position to kind of intercept any kind of lurker contain or attempt at a lurker contain. And those donations were huge because now Dragon, he's pushing out onto the map with basically a control group and a half of Dragoons and a bunch of Templar. He has +1/+1, +2 on the way. StRyKeR has no lurkers in position. He keeps trying to take this bottom left expand instead of the mid right. It's just so hard to defend because he just doesn't have units in position there. And now StRyKeR is going to use that time to just go for a counterattack. He knows he can't defend that base, and he wants to get some tempo onto the map because this game has been all Dragon putting on all kinds of pressure at all times. StRyKeR, I wonder if he did go for that drop, it would be sick to get a lot of units into Dragon's main at this point, but Dragon nailing some nice storms, kind of softening up the Hydralisks, and StRyKeR gets into position with the lurkers, and this is a decent amount of Hydralisks, but that's 5 cannons. That's a lot of Zealots coming out of the gateways. That's a lot of Protoss units returning from their destruction of the 4th base of Zerg, and he's just gonna basically flank this army. Dragon is gonna clean it up absolutely so easily, and now StRyKeR's on 3 base, and he just GG's.
Yeah, he taps out. The flank from the back was just overwhelming from Dragon, and nothing went well for StRyKeR that game. His lurker upgrade, I loved it, just slightly out of position, loses his 4th base twice, and there's just too much Dragon. Dragon used the map to his advantage to streamline his build just that little bit extra, and he was able to take down StRyKeR, one of the best macro Zergs that we've seen. So now StRyKER's on the brink of being eliminated, one of the best up-and-coming players really that the foreign scene has, and Dragon 1 game away from getting his rematch versus Casper.
Yeah, Dragon just kind of outclassing StRyKER that game. I think StRyKER, like, he's a very strong macro player, but I just don't think he's found his groove in terms of tournament play. And I think sometimes he kind of just plays a bit of an underwhelming game. He doesn't have that like edginess to him in terms of, you know, something like you think of Tai2 as a sick tournament player because he can throw anything at you, you know, and though StRyKER might have kind of a broader macro skill set than Tai2, he just doesn't have that killer instinct, and I feel like most of the time he ends up playing these kind of just underwhelming macro games, even though it's the kind of style he wants to play. But Dragon just, I don't know, kind of dismantling him that game.
Well, let's see if StRyKER can bring it back, or if it's going to be Dragon again taking a victory and moving on. Our next map is going to be Sylphid. StRyKER has to win or his tournament life is over, so let's see if he can do it. in the bottom left. He needs to win this, otherwise he's out. It is StRyKeR.
And in the bottom right, it is the green Protoss player, Dragon. Yeah, Sylphid is going to be... Yeah, Sylphid is just a map that we see everyone pick for game 2 because no one's banning this map. And whoever gets to pick the map, you know, so basically, guys, how it works is that the loser... So the winner bans a map out of the map pool, the BSL map pool, and the loser gets to pick a map. And no one really is banning Sylphid because everyone plays Sylphid all the time. And then out of all the maps in the BSL map pool, the most standard one, I guess, is Sylphid. So that's why we keep seeing Sylphid over and over again. This is going to be a good map for both players, for really any player to kind of play their macro game. StRyKeR, again, gonna be interested to see if he whips out anything. I just feel like he's gonna play a standard game once again, and Dragon's gonna play his standard game, and it's gonna be down to execution. Now this game, as opposed to last game, Dragon goes for the gate expand, so gonna put on some early pressure.
Well, the difference here, of course, is the Forge versus gate, but also this is a 9 gate, it's not a 10 gate, so it's gonna be a Zealot just a little bit quicker than usual. StRyKeR going into the tried and true overpull, so this really shouldn't deal any damage unless Dragon's got some really slick Bonneth-esque micro with the Zealot. Drone's going to come in and intercept the probe. We'll see if Dragon can actually deny this hatchery from going down. It looks like he's opted to just let it go down, not really too worried about it. So we're really just going to wait and see what the follow-up is going to be. How much damage can this Zealot actually do? I don't think it should deal that much damage. And luckily for StRyKeR, he gets a first scout off, so he sees it coming from the get-go. So that's already looking pretty good for him.
Yeah, and the overpull is a nice response in general to Gateway first, because he's going to make 6 lings here. Guaranteed, going to stuff the early Zealot pressure. And Dragon is going to scout this. He's going to, you know, of course, there are times where Zerg basically makes only 2 lings despite going overpull, and in that case you would want to pressure with the Zealot. So Dragon kind of smartly keeps the probe alive, or the probe scouting the eggs just to see exactly what StRyKeR's making, and after seeing the 6 lings, he's just gonna go and drop his Forge, mostly to make that wall that much smaller. He doesn't necessarily need the cannons right away, but he does need to make sure these lings don't get into his base for free, and he's gonna just expand behind this while producing Zealots. So, you know, the thing is, the Forge, like, you really do want to get the Nexus out first, but this Forge is much safer. He didn't see any early gas from StRyKeR though, so he's not going to put down a cannon, just going to go straight for the Nexus. So very bog standard response here from Dragon, playing very solidly. StRyKeR himself doing everything right, and this is just your typical kind of gate first versus overpull early game.
Well, the difference for StRyKeR here is that the gas is a little bit later than we are used to. This might not be a lair follow-up. This does look like it could be 973, potentially Hydra Den coming down somewhat soon. We see that 100 gas is going to be mined for StRyKeR pretty soon. Where is it going to go? Is it going to go into lair? Is it going to go into speed? It did actually get spent, and it is, I think, actually going into speed. So still no lair, but that means... But this is curious to me, because what's he going to use the speed for? Is he anticipating a move out with the 5 Zealots? He must, because otherwise he doesn't really need the speed at all.
Yeah, that's totally right. Like, he could go into lair here, but lair is actually an expensive upgrade in general. It's a lot of minerals, and this attack is going to come every time. So speed allows him to just drone up safely. He's not going to get the tech out, but because he doesn't go lair, that means he can actually make more drones earlier, and he can get his hatcheries out earlier, get his economy out earlier, and he's going to have enough to deal with this Zealot harass. So I think this is overall a very stable way to play.
So Dragon coming in, it's 4 Zealots and 1. That is a lot of lings, and they get really good surface area on all of the Zealots on the backside. The probe is dealing a decent amount of damage, but this was a huge botch from Dragon. Sure, he forced out a lot of lings, but not an overwhelming amount of lings. It seems like pretty much StRyKeR built the perfect response. He's going to get even a 5th Zealot for free pretty much. The Zealot does at least confirm the top left base, but really nothing else going well for him. Another hatchery going down. Now, even though he didn't get into the main, if he did see the 4th hatch, that may be a signal to him that this is not lair play, but he actually missed it. Oh, now he finally sees it. The Zealot pokes out. So he should know that this is going to be hatchery man. It's going to be a ton of Hydras coming out, actually, and he's going to need to prepare for a potentially incoming bust. But Stargate so far along, just like last game, he may be able to pop a few Overlords.
I mean, there's no way Dragon doesn't know, just from the speed timing and just from the hatchery coming so fast at this 3rd base of StRyKeR. So StRyKeR gonna power up now. The downside is he's not gonna have a Spire to work with anytime soon. So Dragon doesn't need to get more cannons in terms of getting cannons in his main and his natural line. He doesn't need to commit too much on making Corsairs. Dragon can find some nice kills with these Corsairs if he micros them correctly. And, you know, just in general, not having a Spire is kind of annoying as Zerg, but it's not the end of the world. And, you know, we're trading that for just such a strong economy early. Look, he's already outpacing the Protoss in terms of worker count. He's got so much production going. The Hydra then is out. But there's counterplay to be had on the Protoss side. Stargate is out, Corsair is out. First Corsair is probably going to get a couple Overlord kills, a couple of scouting Overlords for sure. And, you know, the main thing is Dragon wants to confirm that this isn't a Hydra bus. He's going to go in to the Zerg base, fly around, look at the drone count at the main, at the natural, at the 3rd. And once he sees that this is not a Hydra bust, you know, he's going to be able to put down all his gates. He's already putting down more gates, but he's going to definitely be able to put down all the gates that he wants instead of making cannons. And he's going to be able to accelerate his own build as well. So, you know, if Dragon kind of pilots this well, he can definitely offset the big economic boom that StRyKeR kind of undertook.
I think if StRyKeR pumps out about 10 more drones, he's just going to have absolutely perfect saturation across the board. We see the evolution chamber coming down, so he's going to start matching the upgrades. +1 almost already done for Dragon. Speed is also about to kick in, so he is going for around that 7:30, 8-minute timing, but you can see that Hydras are already starting to get pumped out. StRyKeR's already anticipating this. Don't know how many kills the Overlords have actually gotten, but if they can get a couple more, that may be all Dragon needs to actually overwhelm the Hydras, because sure, there's about 7 of them right now, but with non-stop Zealots coming at them and no way to actually build up more Hydras, this might be all Dragon needs to push through. Here come those Zealots. Another Overlord goes down. It's only 6 free supply for StRyKeR, but I think the Sim City is a little bit too strong. But let's see if Dragon is going to try and come in. He's decided that, yeah, the Sim City is a little bit too much. Nothing. Oh, actually, no sunken there, but this is a bit of an overextension. He's going to get surrounded by Hydras now. This might be a big overstep by Dragon.
Yeah, and Dragon's +1 kicks in just in time, so these Zealots, they get on top of the Hydra, will be able to do some nasty damage. But the thing is, StRyKeR's losing a lot of Overlords to these Corsairs. This is exactly what you want to be doing as Dragon. Zealots tanking the Hydralisks, and while the 3 Corsairs here just wrecking so much havoc onto the Zerg's economy, just killing the Overlords, denying production basically, and forcing a lot of those minerals to be spent on replacing the Overlords. And Dragon playing this beautifully, and you can see this is the downside of going for the Spire, skipping the Spire, is that even though StRyKeR had enough units to deal with any kind of actual Zealot attack, the Zealots in conjunction with the Corsairs can still get a lot done. Now, the problem is Dragon did lose a lot of his Zealots. His gateways aren't up just yet. He's still on 2-gate production because he opted to go for, you know, the tech. He opted to go for this relatively high Corsair count. And he can't just bleed these Corsairs, though. That would be really unfortunate. He lost basically every Corsair, so down the road, that's going to be a problem. But look, just now his gateway's warped in, going up to 8-gate. But you can see at the front, he actually only has cannons and Templar. That's going to be enough to basically ward off any kind of Hydra bust. But it's going to be a while before the Protoss gets to go back onto the map. So StRyKeR has some time to rebuild. And because Dragon lost those Corsairs, I would like to see, you know, this is a big problem with StRyKeR's build, is that, yeah, I understand that he didn't go for the fast lair, so he didn't get the Spire, but you should be getting the Spire at some point. Like, the Spire is just such an important building to have, just to, you know,
allow you to build Scourge when you need them, and allow you to switch the Mutalisks if ever the Protoss player overextends with the Corsairs. But like, because there's no Spire, Dragon doesn't actually have to worry about any Mutalisk switch to come and kind of deal with his Templar numbers, and you can just kind of keep making Protoss units, and he's gonna find a really sick timing in a minute or two.
Well, this is actually a really sick timing because lurkers are starting to be morphed, but they're not out just yet. Robotics is also not done. He's going to catch a couple of Templars again, just like last game. 2 Templars go down, potentially 3 or 4, but that's a lot of Zealots streaming across the map to deny this 4th base. A really clutch lurker egg morph on the ramp prevents the Zealots from getting in, and now it looks like Dragon's actually going to be denied. I don't think he has enough Storm to try and bulldoze his way through these 4 lurkers, so he's going to be pushed back, and StRyKeR's going to get up his 4th base. He's got a 10 worker lead. Everything looks fantastic for him.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely in a good spot economically, but again, Dragon with a 6 Storm going to get 3 lurkers for free there. I mean, he does trade the Templars for it, and actually the Templar might live now. He blocks into the range of that burrowed lurker. Dragon's getting some nice trades. Lurkers are definitely expensive units. Hydralisks are obviously a bit more kind of cheap and expendable, but not the lurkers, so really decent trade there for Dragon. But the thing is, yeah, StRyKeR has a sick economy. Dragon has 8 gates though, and he's got +1/+1, I believe, and he's got Dragoon range coming. He's, you know, switching into that Dragoon tech, getting more Templar. So we've spoken about this, and this is PvZ in a nutshell. I mean, I feel like these days Zerg is always going to get a nutso economy going, especially at this stage in the game. StRyKeR has 4 bases. He's got like 8 hatcheries or something like that. But it's just so hard for the lair-based army of StRyKeR, of any Zerg, to deal with basically 2 base Protoss kind of Dragoon, Zealot, Templar composition, that anything can happen. But definitely StRyKeR, you know, if there's one game where he's going to run this over, it's definitely this one. Look at the drone count, 60 drones already to 44 probes. He's got 4 bases going. He's got infinity hatcheries. I mean, he's in a prime spot to basically stop this Protoss push, but it looks like Dragon's just going to take this expansion, and, you know, he can't lose any Templar there.
Well, I can tell you that Dragon has worn out his Z key this game, because that is so many Zealots. It's like 25 Zealots, a handful of Dragoons, and a handful of Templar. And Dragon's looking to put some counterplay onto StRyKeR right now. He doesn't seem to actually have that big of an army, despite the supplies being so close. A lot of it is in the workers. There's a 17 worker differential. He picks off a Dragoon, but he eats a Storm, and there's still a couple Storms remaining. So I think that Dragon might be able to actually push and bust through somewhere. We'll see if the lurker line can hold strong. He's got a lot of lurkers set up now, even one on the high ground and a sunken coming in. But looks like Dragon's decided that one's not enough. He's trying to just bust up there, and he may actually breach it. And just like we saw earlier, he's now into a good position where he can just storm forever. We saw it in the Eclipse game where Jaeyun just blanketed the lurkers and the hydras. Those are amazing. So much supply plummeting for StRyKeR. He was up, now he's down 20. And I think Dragon might actually bust his 4th base.
I don't know, Nyokin, it's not Eclipse though. There's no big ramp for the meat grinding to go off, but the lurkers actually, all the lurkers got stormed there, and StRyKeR keeps funneling all his units into...
Yeah, but
dude,
where's the observer? There's no observer.
There's no observer for Dragon, so these lurkers are actually not going to die. They're going to do more damage, but I think StRyKER is going to lose this base, and it just looked so tight for a second. StRyKER definitely had enough units to defend there, but just miscontrolling, getting stormed. But finally, he's actually chewing through these Protoss units. Now, if Dragon doesn't take this, you know, if he doesn't kill this hatchery, that would be terrible. The hatchery still has half its health points remaining, and I think StRyKER might actually hold on to this hatchery, which would be huge, because that would mean that he'd still have 4 bases. And no, actually, this is going to be really close, but Dragon has a 3rd base behind this, and he's basically equalized the worker count, so Dragon's economy is looking phenomenal as he's taking a 4th base. And actually, StRyKER, despite having all the tools ready to basically stop this Protoss push, kind of just faltered a bit. And now Dragon is in such a commanding lead.
Yeah, taking down the 4th is a huge win, and also eliminating that 20 drone differential is massive. And now Dragon's got a 4th base going up himself. He just needs to put down a couple cannons there, and he's good to go. 4 base Protoss versus 4 base Zerg, or 3 base right now. It's almost unlosable for Protoss at that point. It looks like Dragon's got his eyes set on top left again. It's going to be denied, and it looks like StRyKeR just doesn't have the numbers. He's fizzling out. He's down 35 supply now. Also, killer upgrades for Dragon. He's at 2-1, whereas I think StRyKeR missed his +2 timing. He's only at +1 weapon, so he's not trading as well as he could have been. And I think Dragon's just going to actually take it here.
Yeah, Dragon's kind of getting into this unstoppable position. Look at this Dragoon count, the Zealot count, and StRyKeR kind of running out of steam, and GG.
So GG coming in the dream of USA, or 2 USA players making it into the round of 16, is dead. Dragon is going to move on to face Casper in the winners match. And we've already saw it earlier. Casper actually managed to take down Dragon. So Casper's going to be feeling confident in this matchup. But what do you think? Do you think Dragon can turn it around, or is it going to be all Casper again?
I think, like I said earlier, I think Casper looked really strong on Eclipse, but he just had such a build order advantage. Dragon kind of invested too much into early units and didn't punish the fast third from Casper. And so, and up to that point, I mean, basically, I feel like Dragon played really well in terms of stopping the push from Casper and then the subsequent follow-up. The thing is, he wasn't expecting that huge economy. So the point is, I think if they play more standard games, I think Dragon's still looking really strong. But I mean, standard's not what you're going to get from Casper, at least not build orders. But Casper, we've seen even in his games against, so his earlier game against Dragon, but even in Jaeyun, he has really strong macro. So if he gets into a good position, he can definitely leverage the advantages that he gets from his openings. But I think his openings are a bit high variance. So if Dragon can find just the right kind of balance in making units and balancing his economy, I think he can actually roll over a Casper. So we'll have to see. It's really up in the air who gets out of this one.
Well, we'll find out who's going to make it out in second place. But before we do that, we're going to go to a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to have Casper versus Dragon for the last slot in Group G. We are back, and now it's time to find out who's going to be the last person to make it out of Group G. Is it Dragon or is it Casper? We already saw Casper take out Dragon in the initial match, but Dragon looking pretty strong versus StRyKeR. We'll see if he can get a bit of redemption here. Now, I got a question for you, Gypsy, because this picture that Dragon has is quite hilarious. What do you think he was looking at when he took that photo? Was he dropping the drone line, going for a storm drop? Did he just take this photo after bashing StRyKeR? What was it?
I don't know. I've seen that picture so many times, and not just that, but there's a lot of clown emotes going around with that face on there. And like, I know I don't know who put stuff. There's like a close-up picture of that with a mustache. But actually a very iconic picture, and I think the only picture ever taken to this day of Dragon, very elusive. Not many people know what he looks like. This is the only picture we have of him in the history of humanity. So I think maybe that was probably after he got a couple DTs into someone's mineral line and swiped them, and then kind of got out, because you can see he's got a mischievous look going. But Casper, aka Crime Boss, this guy, not many people know, but he looks like a G, because he is a G, because he's big G Grime Boss, but he also does some sick, he's actually a rapper, so you can go up on YouTube. I'm sure he would want me to talk about this, because, it's a nice advertisement for him, but you can see his kind of music videos on YouTube, if anyone was wondering about that. But I like these pictures. I think we've had some very questionable. Some of the pictures are pretty hilarious, actually, in BSL 10.
Yeah, every time I see Dragon's picture, it reminds me of Skew, a very old school Terran.
Yeah.
Actually, look identical. Like every time.
Yeah.
That actually Skew. So, man, I wish he came back and played. But as far as this match, it's going to be Dragon versus Casper. Casper looked really strong in the first game, got away with a greedy third base. It's just something he does. He just somehow always makes it work. But Dragon looking really good, coming off a victory versus StRyKeR. And in my experience versus Dragon, he's just super solid, but he was not on his A game in the Eclipse game. So hopefully now that his hands are warmed up, he's going to turn it around. We are in a Discord, private Discord, where Dragon has been there. And I know in previous months he was talking about, I think he hurt his hands. So hopefully they've recovered by now. Not too sure how much he practices these days. But I know that when there is a tournament, he definitely tries his best to get as much practice in. So maps like Optimizer, even if it's not in the ladder pool, for sure, this guy's going to have a decent amount of experience. So if we see Optimizer again, or something like Bubbles that is not often played, for sure he's going to have a lot of experience. And I would tend to favor Dragon on a map like Optimizer, even though we saw players like Koget and Kryak use this map very well, getting so many tanks and just decimating Protoss armies. But we are going to be getting into our game right now. Casper versus Dragon. Can Casper seal the deal, make it out going 3-0 or 3-1 versus Dragon? Or is there going to be Dragon getting some redemption here and being the only player to make it out for Canada? So in the bottom left, in the brown, repping the arrows tag, it is Grime Boss or Casper.
In the bottom right, we've got the Canadian Hope. It is a Dragon. And yeah, I know, especially I've been calling Casper Grime Boss Casper. It is the same person, guys, in case people were wondering in the chat. The thing is, he's using Grime Boss in game, and on his Twitch, he actually uses Grime Boss. And personally, I think Grime Boss is an epic name. I love the name. Casper's also a sick name, but Grime Boss is where it's at. So in case you guys were wondering, why do we keep calling Casper Grime Boss and Grime Boss Casper? It's the same player. It's not like there's 3 players in the game. But yeah, Optimizer, I'll say this, I feel like Dragon, as you pointed out, Nayak, and Dragon's always practicing. I know he's also busy with other things in real life, like he's not just always on StarCraft, but he always finds time to play practice games, and he's just a very disciplined guy and very smart too. So for sure he has something planned out on this map. But Casper, you know, I think Casper is more of an intuitive player. I think he's not the type of player that prepares as extensively as someone like Dragon. But you can see that he's very strong just mechanically and tactically. He makes a lot of units. He can go for, he has these ideas. Maybe his builds aren't always extremely well refined, but I feel like just his gameplay in general is pretty solid from watching these two games. I mean, really, he does play really strong macro games. So we're gonna have to see, you know, what triumphs here. Is it gonna be that preparation, or is it gonna be that intuitiveness? But Optimizer, definitely a map that you need to at least be acquainted with. We saw yesterday La Abuela taking the one gas at the bottom of his main. I don't want to see that again, because the bottom gas, of course, only has 1,000 gas. So hopefully we don't see stuff like that. But these players definitely must have played a couple practice games on this map at this point.
We see that Dragon, despite having no success with the Zealot in the Eclipse game, has decided that that's the way to go, and already we've got shenanigans because this is Grime Boss continuing to mine gas, and versus someone that is very sneaky. When you see a wall, this may already be a tip-off that this could be some one-base play. Optimizer we saw the other day, where you can actually siege the high ground overlooking your main. You remember that top left?
Yeah.
I think it was body positioning tanks on the high ground, and then using some tanks on the low ground, and just the combination was super strong. Now that's not going to be the case this time, because this is going to be a 2-fact. So immediately I'm checking the player names, because I'm pretty sure, unless I see Artosis mentioned in the players, you don't ever see 2-fact.
I mean, 2-factory, it's a strong build though, honestly, because the thing is, you don't have to hit right away. You can hit at... So the idea is that Terran in this matchup, regardless of what the build they do is, they always kind of threaten the 3-tank push, sometimes 4 tanks, with Vulture speed and Mines follow-up, and just 2-factory kind of Vulture behind it. Whether you're expanding, whether you're staying on one base, it can always come. Now, the strength of this one base timing, as I say that though, Grime Boss is going for one machine shop and one without, and he's getting the mines really early. I don't like this variation at all. We'll see how it works for him. But this is, you know, it's definitely difficult to stop. You still have to have... Oh, and actually a Citadel of a Doom coming from Dragon.
Well, this was not a response to what he scouted, because the Citadel's too far along. So it looks like Dragon had just already planned out that he was going to go for some DT play. Now, maybe he saw Casper use this particular strategy on this map before, because this is not Dragon-esque. This is not something that you see ever from him. And DT follow-up versus this particular opener is going to be amazing. Once one DT comes, well, as I say that, this push is super fast. Dragon might actually just insta-lose.
I was going to say, Casper went for just the fastest possible push, just one tank, and this is probably the best push variation of this you could have against what Dragon is doing, because look, he doesn't have as many units as he normally would. I've seen Dragon actually do this build before. He does Citadel into Templar sometimes off the expansion, because it's not really all in. You're just getting quick arbiters behind it, and the DTs can sometimes steal you games. So, you know, the thing is, this pylon wall is completely kind of stopping the Terran push from occurring, and at this point he's buying so much time that DTs are going to be out. But luckily for Casper, he actually is going to have 2-factory Vulture production behind this, so he can definitely lay down mines. But it doesn't look like Casper even wants to take an expansion. It doesn't look like he actually wants to play this map at all. He's just going to go for the killing blow, but this is not going to work because he has absolutely no detection at the front. So once the mines go down, this army is going to be ripe for the taking if the DTs get on top of it.
Yeah, I think that we're about to see Casper tap out pretty soon. There's no eBay in sight. DTs are just going to swipe down all of these units. A mine drag may even potentially just eliminate everything instantly. And there's still no mines. 2 DTs are out on the map. He's got to be careful to swipe down. Oh, actually, that's a big mine hit right there. And the DT actually takes out... Both of the DTs went down. And those are not units that build very quickly, but really good goon control right there. He eliminates both the tanks behind this. Casper even pulled 2 SCVs, so really he's not even mining that efficiently his main, and there's no command center anywhere near I don't insight. I don't see command center start. I don't see it in his main, so he's way behind.
Yeah, this game. I mean, Nyoken is pretty much over. Like Casper, if he expanded behind this, it would have been fine because he would have had. Yes, his expansion would have been a bit later, but he would have had 2 factory vulture production to keep the Protoss contained. But look, he even lost all his tanks, all 3 tanks. Now he has no tank defense in his base. He's still rallying. The problem is that, you know, in this kind of craziness, Dragon got his robo down. He finished his robo. He's making a shuttle. So now DT drop is going to come into Casper's main, and how does Casper deal with DTs in his main? I mean, his academy is about to finish, but since he only has 1 command center, he's only going to have 1 scan to work with. The eBay just now goes down, but that's way too late. The shuttle is already on the way, and I just don't see how Casper lives through this.
Well, we saw Casper have ridiculous holds versus Jaeyun for the last 10 minutes of the Reap the Storm game, but he's going to need another miracle here, because not only does he not have an eBay, not only does he only have 1 ComSat, there's a shuttle here. So once he unloads, he better kill the DT, or he better kill the shuttle, but with no anti-air, no armory, you know the shuttle's not dying. Okay, we're playing with fire, with mines right here. Okay, he just unloads directly in the mineral line, and this is just going to be GG pretty much. There's no way you can deal with DTs with a shuttle. If it was no way to load them back up, well, I can't even believe he got 1 of them. I mean, that's way better than I was expecting.
Oh my god, he's actually going to finish this turn also, so gonna keep playing this game out, but because he had to make the eBay, and because he had to make that turret, he still hasn't started his command center, and Protoss is ahead almost double the worker count, using way more mineral patches than the Terran, so his economy is basically out of this world. And I mean, Casper's gonna get a lot of vultures into Dragon's base now. The thing is, Dragon actually ran out of goons. He still has 3 dragoons. I don't know if he has an observer just yet. He does have an observatory, so an observer is probably on the way, but these goons are gonna get massive amounts of damage, but they really have to basically kill every probe in existence, because look, it's 34 probes to 18 SCVs, and Dragon actually does have an observer come out finally. He has 2 observers and dragoons to work with, and really Casper is still going to get a couple of worker kills here, but remember, he doesn't have a command center building just yet, so he really, I mean, it's like that Jaeyun game. Maybe he can make it happen, but it's just so hard from this position as Terran. He just doesn't have an expansion coming. So like, the Stargate is already on the way for Dragon. There's a DT in Casper's main, and although Casper is going to get some counterplay here, he's still so far behind.
Yeah, and now a counterattack is coming from Dragon, but he does have to be a bit careful that, you know, Casper might backstab him with a couple vultures, and vultures are some of the highest DPS units in the game when dealing with workers. So that is a potential possibility that Dragon has to be wary of, but this 1 DT is just so annoying because, again, there's no anti-air. The shuttle's just never going to die. The DT's probably never going to die. As I say that, of course it dies, because that's just the caster curse, you know.
Yeah, you got some questionable calls, Nyoken, but I can't blame you because I'm having the same thoughts. And Dragon, I mean, the thing is, yeah, these DTs are dying. Casper's living, but he's in literally an unwinnable situation. I mean, he still doesn't have an expansion. He's only on 2 tanks, 3 vultures. He's making units out of 2 factories. Now his command center just now is going down, but look, the Arbiter Tribunal is on the way for Protoss, and there's no natural in sight. I mean, I'm gonna sound like a broken record again, like I did in the game of Jaeyun and Casper, but literally, it's so hard to see Casper winning from this position. It's just such a hole he's dug into. It really would take kind of a tremendous effort from Dragon throwing this game for Casper to come back. I mean, truly, this game is really, really out of reach for the Terran player.
Well, we did see Casper try hiding a base on the Eclipse game, and he got away with it. So I would like to see Dragon just send an observer or something across every single base to make sure that doesn't happen. As I say that, we see that he is doing that. He knows that that's the only way that Casper could get back into this game, is he has some type of hidden economy somewhere out on the map. There's going to be nothing actually out on the map, because we see there's no command center anywhere. It's just literally Dragon miles and miles ahead. Arbiter comes out. I actually would have liked to see carriers, because I feel like a recall botch could potentially, you know, get Casper some breathing room, and then he takes the third base. Whereas carriers, there's no way you can go deny it, right? So it just slowly builds up over and over and over and over. But really, it doesn't matter. It's 48 workers to 22 SCVs. The econ is absolutely bananas for Dragon. He's starting to take his third base too. Everything is going extremely well for him. Finally, Casper gets up his natural. At least it's optimizer, right? Where if there's a potential map where you can come back maybe with the extra few resources you have, this is gonna be the map, but it's a tall order.
Yeah, it's such a tall order that I just I don't know, man. I mean, Dragon's up 50 supply, twice the supply. He has a third base, still up to twice the worker count. And I mean, you know, Casper, he can't even add factories. He has to add his starport here because, you know, arbiters are on the way. His upgrade is halfway done, but he's still on 0-0 at 13 minutes into the game. I mean, I know this was a crazy opening, but it's just, I mean, it is a tournament game, so you can't blame Casper for playing this out at all. I wonder if he knows just how far behind he is. He scans the third base. He probably also scanned the main base, knows arbiters are coming, like I said, so he knows just how bad of a position he's in. But, I mean, you know, he's going to keep playing this out. He's going to have a lot of time to think about the next game. You know, I don't know if he thinks this is a winnable game, but yeah, I mean, it is a tournament game. You kind of have to stay in here. He's going to have more time to think about the next game. But really, they're both kind of just going through the motions, and Dragon's going to come out with a big recall. It looks like he's going straight for recall. And I mean, this game might not end right away because it is Terran. You can't just move into the natural like that. But what can Terran do from here?
Well, Terran's doing what Terran should do. It's going to be tank man. I saw that his army comp is about 9 tanks and 2 vultures. We already saw how well Cryok and Koget traded on here. So I think this is exactly what you should do. He's got his starport up. He's got his science facility coming in. So he's going to be starting +2 weapon pretty quickly. First 2 arbiters are already going to be out. Stasis is also already available for the arbiter. It's got 120 energy. Vultures get by. Every probe kill matters here. Like, this is how Casper can get back into the game. Remember, it was like 20 SCVs to 50. Now it's 55 to 37. Slowly, Casper creeping back up. It all comes down to the recall, really. If Dragon doesn't aggressively take bases, like, I don't see him aggressively taking top right. If he fails a couple recalls, for sure, Casper can get back into the game. I do realize he's getting doubled in supply. But if there's ever a scenario where Casper can come back, that's one way that it happens, is a botched recall over and over and over. Now, I think I see some type of drop going to bottom right, or is that just an observer? Yeah, it looks like that's actually Brown moving to Dragon's main. This is going to be a vulture drop into the probe line again.
Yeah, the vulture drop is, like you said, Naokin, he's basically going to run around with vultures while building up his tank count. Hopefully he can kill enough probes to make a difference in this game, but you know, I mean, he is climbing back up in the worker lead, or in the worker count, but at the same time, Dragon, he's just macroing out a maxed army. He has a 4th base now. He has arbiters gaining energy, and the thing is, Casper's going to have a decent army here, but at the same time, not going to have kind of the production that you would want to have at this point, I'm assuming. Like, he's still only on 3 factories. There's no way you can just keep making tanks like that without sacrificing something, and usually it's the factory count. So looks like Casper's going to go for, I mean, I doubt he's going to go for a timing attack, because he just doesn't have the vultures. He doesn't have the production behind it. I'm assuming he's pushing out here to maybe take a 3rd base. If he goes further than this without vulture support, yes, okay, so he's just going to siege out outside of his main to allow access for that 3rd base. But Dragon, he sees that the Terran army is basically no longer in its base. He's just going to go for this. It doesn't really matter if he trades poorly. He knows he has an overwhelming supply advantage, so might as well just trade it for a bunch of tanks and reset the Terran army. Here comes some 6 stasis go out onto 6 tanks, and Dragon's just gonna plow through this army, easy peasy, and I think we're gonna see GG coming anytime, any second now.
Yeah, down 100 in supply. We knew this was going to happen. There's just way too much Protoss. Casper's going to tap out, and Dragon is going to go up 1-0 in the series, and now he's 1 game away from making it out. And I think that was just a big mistake from Casper to go for the aggressive opener, but also Dragon got a bit lucky there going straight into DTs because he is not known for that. So he must have had that either planned for this map or some sort of read on Casper, because in my experience versus Dragon, that almost never happens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because Dragon has done that against me, so like I wasn't surprised seeing that build. And again, it's not really that all in, especially if you're going DTs after your Nexus. The main thing is usually you kind of skip Robo and go straight Arbiters if the DTs do no damage, but you know, not surprising seeing that pulled out. I was surprised by Casper's variation of 2 factory, because kind of the most standard variation of 2 factory that we usually see is the double add-on into 3 or 4 tanks, and then you get double vulture upgrades. And actually what Casper was doing was much better against something like what Dragon was doing, the DTs, because it hits before DTs are out, and you primarily have vultures with mines with just the 1 tank. But because Protoss went for DT so fast, they don't have that many units. But Dragon very smartly actually made a pylon wall, and that pylon wall gave him so much time that he completely stopped that attack. And that pylon wall, I don't think many players would have thought about doing that. So very, very, very smart from Dragon, and because of that, he, you know, smacked down the attack. And surprisingly here, we're gonna see Reap the Storm for game 2. So let's get into game 2. Casper versus Dragon. Casper has to win this to stay alive. Dragon could win this and advance out of this group.
In the bottom middle in the red, we have our Russian Terran. It is Casper.
And in the, what is this, like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock position, we have the purple Protoss. It is Dragon. And, you know, the thing is, the fact that out of all the maps in the map pool, Casper picked this map is a bit mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, this is a bit unusual because this is not the map I would pick, and Casper does like aggressive plays, and this map is pretty good for drops. So because of that, I think if I was Dragon, I would expect that to be a potential opener for Casper. But really, I'm a bit confused by this pick also. I'm surprised he didn't pick Sylphid or Polypoid. I guess he doesn't want to get into a big macro game with Dragon. But we'll see what Casper has in store. He did just pull off a 2-fact. It really went pretty poorly for him. But now that Dragon has shown that he's willing to go for a 1-base play at least once, I don't think Dragon's going to go for it again. So even though I'm not a big fan of 2-fact, I wouldn't actually mind it in this particular scenario to see it being pulled out twice in a row. Oh, it's a 10-10-10, baby.
Yeah, not surprising. He's gonna go for the strong FD probably, and I mean it could also be a strong 2-fact, but usually with 10-10-10, your economy isn't that good to support fast 2. I mean, I don't know, dude. I'm not an expert on 10-10-10. I don't know what you think about 10-10-10. I think it's usually used for strong FD, right?
Yeah, so 10-10-10 can be strong FD. It can also be a weird variation of a 2-fact where you build up like 5 tanks, you get siege mode and sit on the high ground, build a bunker, fake like you're going command center, but never go for it. But I don't think that would work particularly well versus Dragon, because he is somebody that will poke with the goon to make sure that the command center is there. So this is probably going to be like 8 or 9 Marines. And this is a really strong push. It comes about 20 seconds faster than a normal just factory. So that means he's going to have about 1.5 tanks. Of course, half a tank doesn't exist. But if he just waits and delays his push from a normal push, like 10 seconds, he's going to have 2 tanks compared to 1. So it is super, super strong. And remember, I think this is actually a pretty good mind game because on Eclipse he showed an FD and didn't use it. So now he's going for what looks like an FD, and it's going to be an even stronger FD. So I think that if Dragon under-prepares, thinking about the Eclipse game, he may just instantly lose.
Yeah, but at the same time, Grime Boss basically had one of the best macro maps for Terran in the pool, which was Optimizer. And instead of playing a macro game on there, he played a very aggressive game. Even game 1, he was being aggressive with the FD. So I think Dragon probably suspects there to be early game aggression here. So maybe he's going to be able to adjust there. Now, he did go for the Zealot Scout again, no Probe Scout. If he actually went the Probe Scout this game, that's the one thing that sometimes Terran players could abuse against Dragon, because he's consistently never probe scouting. He always just gets the Zealot to be safe against stuff like proxy racks and then uses it to scout. So he's just going to go straight for the Nexus. He has absolutely no scouting information. He doesn't know anything that the Terran is doing. He does have 2 Goons and 1 Zealot, but I don't think that's going to be enough to stop a push of the magnitude that Grime Boss is like producing right now.
Yeah, and mines are coming in, so everything looks very normal. We do have to wait and see if this is going to be a second tank or if it's just going to be a vulture. For now, it looks like it's just going to be 1 tank, about 8 marines, and a vulture. There it is. So once the tank falls, there's still going to be a lot of DPS in the marines, but of course the marines aren't going to have range. So if the goons are in any critical mass number, such as even 3, they're going to be able to deal with these marines very easily. But now, oh no, he's going to lose a Dragoon for free, and you can't lose that versus an FD. Now, luckily for him, I guess, is on Reap the Storm, he at least has high ground, but he only has 1 actual goon out. He's going into 3-gate ob. I think he is actually going to lose his Nexus here. There's just so much DPS, shield battery going down, but marine DPS is actually crazy. The probes are being pulled off. I don't know how much that's actually going to help. The vultures already have mines too. Here comes that Zealot and probes. Let's see if he can actually finish. Oh, he picked off 1 of the mines instantly. Zealots already did really good probe surround, but there's only 2 goons here.
Yeah, that was a really good surround, but the thing is, there's so many marines, so many vultures that the probes just get instantly melted. And now the problem is, behind this there's going to be rally vultures, and we have no units as Protoss. So, you know, Casper can just start laying mines absolutely everywhere. We have no obs in sight because we went for the 3-gate kind of in panic, realizing this FD is coming. And Casper is just basically in such a strong position. He's going to take his expansion behind this. So unlike Optimizer, actually, you know, has a more of a mid-game focus, and this really was just an FD push. I mean, he did cut a lot of SCVs to make this work, so it's not like the Terran economy is where it should be right now, but he did so much damage and basically clearing half the Protoss's probes. And at this point, Dragon is stuck with 3 gates that he can't even produce out of because he only has 14 probes. And, you know, quickly, this is looking very bad for Protoss. I mean, I don't think Casper is going to be able
no!
If he hits that mine, this game's basically over now. Casper can basically move out onto Dragon's main, and he just GG's, yeah.
He just instantly GG's. So when Casper needed a win the most, he clutches it with a strong FD push, and that's going to push it to game 3. And even if Dragon had lost the Nexus, if he hadn't lost those 6 probes in the beginning, I think he was still okay because Casper spent a lot of resources to go for that. Now, as an observer, I see what's going on, but of course, in the moment, you don't know that. But Casper hitting a really slick timing in the vulture positioning to block the goons from being able to retreat, to make sure that they hit mines. That was fantastic. I love his mine positioning, absolutely incredible. So now Dragon's going to be feeling the pressure too, and clearly the pressure didn't get to Casper. So we're going to see game 3 here. I wonder what map pick Dragon's going to go for. I think he needs to go for a big map here. Don't let Casper pick something, or don't pick a map where Casper can just push you instantly. Optimizer is actually a small map too. So I hope we see like Polypoid or Bubbles, which is Fighting Spirit, because those are 2 relatively large maps.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Casper just vetoes Polypoid. Okay,
there we go.
Polypoid. So Dragon picks Polypoid, and Polypoid is going to be the bane of a lot of the Terran players in this, especially playing TVP, because they can no longer rely on
the timing pushes. But nice pick here from Dragon going into the rubber match between Dragon and Casper. Winner gets out of his group, loser goes home. So let's get right into it.
In the bottom right, coming off of a really solid timing, it is Casper.
And in the top left, in the what is that? I mean, it's a Protoss. It's Dragon. But what color is that? Oh yeah, this is no, it's not.
Olive, dark green.
No, it's not olive. Don't worry about it. I like this color though; it's really nice. But what I was gonna say before I realized that it would probably be better to talk about it once we're in the game. Polypoid, I think, is gonna be the big test of a lot of Terran players in this, especially TVP, because like I pointed out yesterday, a lot of the non-Korean Terran players, they like going two base push, two base timing. That being said, Casper did go for that fast third base on Eclipse, so maybe we're gonna see that from, I mean, clearly Casper is not afraid of going into three bases. But on this map, the point is, on this map, it's just so hard to hit an early mid-game timing, or just a mid-game timing, because of the massive high ground at each player's is third mineral only. That high ground is such a defensive position.
Yeah, it's almost impossible for Terran to move up the ramp. Dragoons in the high ground, literally any time Terran has to fight up high ground, the tanks don't hit nearly as well, nearly as effectively. And if Zealots can get on top of it, it's just going to be an easy wipe for the Protoss. So we'll see if Casper is going to continue to go with the trend. Is he going to go with a two base push? Is he going to try and take a third base pretty quickly and follow up with another 1-1 timing? I really want to see what Dragon's going to put his life on. Is it going to be another two base arbiter that we saw basically come out on optimizer? Is it going to be more macro play? Are we going to see carriers again? We do see that Casper only has one mining gas, so it is actually going to be an expansion this time. Another Zealot coming out. I'm just very surprised that every single game we've seen the Zealot come out, but really the Zealot has been negligible. It's done nothing really, because Casper's built so many Marines anyways that it almost instantly dies every single time I see an engagement. Like what we just saw in Reap the Storm, this SCV got in front of the Zealot and then it just got blown up almost immediately. So curiously, another Zealot coming out, like, well, as you pointed out last game, it seems that Dragons just doesn't want to scout, so he's using the Zealot every time. But really, other than that, it's not been that effective for him.
Yeah, this is one thing I really dislike about Dragon's play in general, is this is his go-to PPT. He almost, without fail, this is what he does every single game. And the Zealot is never meant to do damage. Like, he's using everything to scout. He's just trying to play as stable as possible. Now, it's really nice for Protoss not to scout with the early probe, because it really accelerates your build. But at the same time, it just means Terran can do whatever they want. In the last game, we saw exactly the weakness of this type of play from Dragon, this very low limited information play. Dragon, though, I really would have liked for him to run past the bunker just to see what was going on in Casper's main, but Dragon's going to be happy with just confirming the command center there. So, but yeah, last game we saw that basically Casper completely punished that build through his build selection, or the early Zealot. I mean, you know, Dragon had no idea that was coming, and he just straight up died to it because his scouting Dragoon got caught out. So fortunately on Polypoid, a strong FD like that is very unlikely, because look at the rush distances between the cross spawns. I mean, it's just absolutely massive. Now Casper's going to get a rescout here. He's going to see that it's a command center, or I mean a nexus. So Casper knows that Dragon's playing standard. Dragon knows that Casper is playing standard. And at this point, you know, the deviations are going to come in for the builds, at least for Protoss. We see that Dragon's not going for that Citadel. He's actually going for a Robo. And
Casper is actually going for a quick second factory, no academy just yet. So this usually is indicative of a push, but I really don't like this in these positions because look, they're cross spawns. He's gonna have to walk all the way to the other side of the map, which is gonna give Protoss so much more time to get units, and this is only a 2-tank push. I don't think this is gonna do anything, Nyoken, and if anything, it might backfire onto Casper.
Well, this seems to be what Casper loves to do, goes against the trend or makes a bit of a modification. As you pointed out, the trend right now is to go for 3 tanks. That means it hits at around 6:15 when they get across the map, but we see that Casper is going to hit about 20 to 30 seconds faster, and that might be all he needs to push through. There's 4 Marines here, 2 tanks, mines are already being set up by these vultures. There's only 4 goons, which is the magic number to 1-shot Marines and 2-shot tanks. But look, now he has 6, and now these tanks are going to be picked off, or almost one of them goes down. But now with the observer out, as you said, this push got denied pretty easily. But it's Casper. He's got vultures sharking around. He may be able to find an opening. All 5 of those goons were slightly out of position, but he doesn't go in for any probe kills. Fast Citadel coming in. I love this follow-up. It's going to be about an 11-minute Arbiter stasis timing. So this is going to be 2-base Arbiter, one of the builds that I find to be the hardest to play against. And I think this is going to be very good versus somebody like Casper who loves to do timings. Arbiter is obviously the ultimate counter to timings from Terran. So it kind of forces Casper to play upgrade style. Otherwise, he's going to be punished pretty easily.
Damn. Looking at Casper's build, I'm really curious. I'm not... I'm gonna say this straight up. I don't know if he's like been watching me stream recently, but he's literally doing close to the identical build that I like doing a lot in TVP, which is the 2 factory into a small push like this just to get vultures out onto the map. He got siege mode behind, didn't commit the tanks, got his armory as soon as he pushed out, and usually I like to go with 3 tanks. But this is so similar to what I like doing. It would be really funny to me if we actually both had the same idea on how to play this game. Or, you know, he actually has been watching the stream, but it's really a really solid way to play. Like, he got a bunch of mines out onto the map, so he sees what's going on. He didn't lose any tanks, importantly, so that was good for him. It didn't really backfire. And now he's taking a fast 3rd base. He has upgrades going. This usually is a bit greedy against a lot of, for example, if you do this on ladder, you're going to get heavily punished because a lot of Protosses don't play this kind of quick Arbiter timing into a 3rd base. So reading Dragon beautifully here, Casper is. He's basically setting himself up as well as you possibly could as a Terran, and he's basically playing a very clean 3-base build. So, you know, as much complaining as I was doing earlier about when's a Terran player going to play a 3-base build, you know, Casper pulling through, and I really like absolutely everything that he's doing with his build. Just now getting the eBay, he knows it's Arbiters, he's scanned. Now he's probably going to piece it together that there's also a 3rd base just from the gateway count. He only sees 2 gates. So this is basically the dream scenario for Terran. The fact that he took his 3rd base that fast. Now, it could have been even better if he actually expanded to the gas expansion, but having the mineral only means that he's going to be able to have the high ground, which is the most important position to have in this matchup. And look, he scans the 3rd. He knows exactly what's going on. So Casper playing very well, I would say playing the mid game perfectly here. And Dragon, of course, setting himself up very well as well, getting the Arbiter and the 3rd base, which in itself is also a very greedy way to play for Protoss, because a lot of the times that could get punished by kind of random builds. But I think he read Grime Boss's intentions very well, and so he was able to get this 3rd base. Now he's looking to take a 4th base also with stasis and arbiters and a bunch of gates coming. So I think both players kind of setting themselves up as macro intensively as they possibly could heading into the mid game here.
Well, this is a bit of a weird follow-up from Casper because it looked like we were going to be playing upgrade Terran, but there's 6 factories now, but also a starport is coming down. So that would be indicative of the upgrades coming in soon. But I'm curious why he needs all 6 factories right now. We see Dragon putting down 4th Nexus. That's very standard for seeing what he's already seen. Vulture's going to get a couple kills onto these pros, but nothing catastrophic. Still a 5-worker lead for Dragon, everything looks fantastic for him. And one of the dangers of playing versus 2 base Arbiter is you can see that Dragon's actually just going into stasis. He's not going into recall. That means that Casper actually needs to have a lot of units. We saw yesterday Boa just over and over try and throw units into the 3rd base without success. But if you can get a good stasis onto a clump of tanks, that may be all that Dragon needs to actually push through. So Casper's going to need to be very careful, set up a depot wall, a bunker wall, or something, because if he gets like a catch of 3 tanks right there with 1 stasis, that's going to be massive loss of DPS. But I don't think Dragon's going to actually do that. I think he's just going to bank this energy, bank up Arbiters. My opinion is once you reach 4 Arbiters, that's when it gets really scary for Terran. That's when you can stasis like 15 tanks, no joke. That can eliminate almost like 80% of your tanks. So I have a feeling that that's probably what we're going to see.
Yeah, and you're totally right, Jaeyun, pointing out Casper's variation here. He actually got the factories too early. I think he wanted to eventually go, as he gets a couple of probes here, this is really good for him, but the thing is, it's obviously very good for Grind Boss to kill these probes, but Dragon, as he keeps killing probes, man, is doing way more damage than I would anticipate. But Dragon, because of his opening, because it was so economically focused, he got his 3rd base up really well. I mean, he's still going to have a decent probe count there, and he has 4 Nexuses to replenish that probe count. So, you know, Vulture Harass at this stage in the game is just not as consequential in terms of, oh, wow, you saw a bunch of probes go down, but that's not going to change too much. It's a good trade for Casper. Now, the problem is, Casper, he delayed his starport, and I think unintentionally so, because he eventually built it anyway, and he didn't go for 2 base attacks. So now his upgrades are actually going to be delayed. His vessel just now coming out. He doesn't have an EMP to work with. Dragon's going to come in here and deny. Now Dragon's actually losing a lot of units, just moving to the 6 o'clock. This is a huge blunder from Dragon. I wonder if the nerves are getting to him a bit. Sometimes he does slip up like that. The units kind of wandering around and just dying for no reason. Obviously, he was moving his army here to just deny the 6 o'clock, and he's still bleeding more units. This is really bad for Dragon. He can't afford to lose units for free here because Casper is getting close to his timing. I mean, he doesn't have +2 on the way at all. He only has +1 armor. He forgot his +2. That's going to be a massive blunder, but Dragon is just bleeding units left, right, and center, and that's going to be a terrible mistake because now, I mean, he's down a couple supply. He does have a lot of stasis to work with, but he can't lose any more units.
Yeah, and he's about to have EMP, and that's an Arbiter that has almost 200 energy, and I think he has EMP actually. All of these units actually got taken out. So now Casper has a 25 supply lead, but there's a second Arbiter. But just look at how pitiful the actual standing army is for Dragon. That's a lot of tanks. Where's the stasis though? An EMP didn't land. There's one of them. Gets his own shuttle though, but all of the tanks in the front are now isolated. There's only 4, but because there's just a lack of units, 3 goons, that's it. He has to back off. Funny enough, the Arbiters can actually kill the tanks because there's no Goliaths, but he's not using them. But Casper needs to consistently reinforce this because this army is actually not that strong. It's only 4 tanks. It's only about 12 vultures, but where's the supply? There's 135 for Dragon. There's only 8 in the air. So where's the rest of it?
Well, we saw where the rest of it went. He just bled it out trying to cancel that 6 o'clock. He lost so many units. This attack from Terran is actually kind of pitiful. You never see this few units, but the thing is, he just killed so many Protoss units for free that Dragon has no way of defending against this, and behind it, Casper has like 10 factories producing, so if he can successfully reinforce this position, it's gonna be really hard. But at the end of the day, I mean, he still has to push up this high ground, and that high ground is going to be very, very important for Dragon in this defense, and it's going to do so much work in cutting the Terran DPS, the Terran army's DPS down. Remember, Terran basically only has ranged units, so every time you take an engagement on the high ground, you're essentially limiting the damage output of the Terran army. And now Dragon's just going to give up that position. He doesn't feel confident in holding it, and I think maybe that is going to be a mistake because now Casper can essentially take the position for himself and use it to his advantage. Dragon kind of threatening a counterattack here, but Casper, look, Casper actually look, Casper's actually a really good player, man. He plays very well in these positions. He's putting down mines everywhere. He's macroing like a god. The only thing is he's not taking his 4th base, but in terms of mining, this is exactly what Terran needs to do. He's playing such an impeccable macro game, and I don't think Dragon's going to find the opening he's looking for with his counterattack.
Yeah, he's going to try and counterattack, but there's tanks already set up. There's a lot of mines too, and he used all of his stasis energy to deny that attack. Well, now he might have a little bit of energy. He gets the majority of the tanks, but there's so many mines here that there's going to be big losses for Dragon. Zealot eating a lot of the mines. Maybe the Dragoons can do some work here, but more reinforcements from Casper coming in, but that is a lot of goons on the high ground, so he may be able to deny this command center, but he lost his nexus too. And meanwhile, on the other side of the map, Casper is pushing too. He's not just sitting there and waiting, so he's going to try and end this game, but is it too much? Tanks on the high ground not being supported by these vultures on the side. What are they doing? But there's just not enough zealots, and maybe Casper can push through, but as I say that, those are isolated units now, and if Protoss turns around, potentially can hit these tanks from the back, and that looks like exactly what he's going to do.
Oh my god, I'm getting flashbacks to that Terra versus Boa game on Eclipse where this is exactly what was happening, kind of a base trade situation, and Terra unfortunately just lost all his tanks, but this time Casper does not lose his tanks for free, and he has such a sick contain. He's getting turrets up, getting so many tanks out. Now there's not many vultures, but at the same time there's just not that many Protoss units ready to bust. But nice stasis going down there, and zealots just walking in the front for free. The vultures were out of position, there were no mines there, but still so many Terran units. The Dragoons coming from behind, and is this gonna be enough? Oh my god, massive shots going down onto the Dragoons. They all die, and Casper has just enough to hold on, and Dragon GG's.
Yeah, Dragon taps out, and Casper with a fantastic push and a bit of unlucky movement from Dragon to lose so many goons in the early stages to deny the 4th base. But you got to give credit where credit was due. When Casper saw an opening, he pounced on it instantly. And as I was saying, Dragon was just building up that Arbiter count, but unfortunately for him, he hits the stasis, but the army count doesn't exist, so he can never engage it, and now he doesn't have any more stasis to actually deal with the army. I think Dragon, despite losing the units, had a decent shot of holding the attack if he could just stabilize, but not able to do so. The counterattack got the command center, but still just not enough. And Casper's going to make it out in 2nd place in this group today, looking very well, looking very good. And he takes out one of the strongest Protoss players in all of BSL, Dragon. So very impressive. Wow, I actually am a bit surprised at how well Casper did, because even though he's a great player, like Dragon is really, really good. And he looked good versus Jaeyun too.
Yeah, Casper played phenomenally that game. I think Dragon's going to be a bit disappointed with his performance today. I think versus Casper, especially that last game, I mean, what was he doing? He just lost so many units for free. That should never happen like that. And that's literally the only reason he lost that game. Literally the only reason he lost that game is because he bled 2 control groups for free. And Casper just went and punished him instantly. But Casper played out of his mind to make that happen. You know, it's not trivial for Terran to walk across the map like that and just instantly win the game. But anyway, guys, that's it for Group G. Jaeyun and Casper get out. I guess kind of a small upset there, Casper getting out. But I mean, Casper's showing just how strong he is. But before we go into this quick break, you know, quick shout out to our sponsors, Liquipedia, Blizzard, and Esports Fund. Thanks so much. Obviously, you know, without them, this wouldn't be possible. And also, there is a giveaway in Zero's channel. I think Star Lover actually donated last month like $100, a couple $100 for coaching, but he can't make it. He doesn't have the time to receive that coaching. So if you would like some coaching from a really strong Zerg player, you should type what is it in the chat? I think Zero is gonna exclamation sub draw, and you'll